What's a red flag when looking for a job? Part 2. If the office is a disgusting hole and bathrooms are dirty. This is kind of an odd one, but here's what happened to me. I left a decent size, 400 employees, successful company because my career path was dead-ended. I had 2 positions above me. One was my boss, who was not going to retire for 20 years, and the VP, who was above him and also not going anywhere for 10 years or more. I took a job at a much smaller company, 70 employees, but it had a ton of growth potential. It was a small company on the verge of blowing up and getting big. I didn't pay a ton of attention to my surroundings because I was too excited about more money, growth, etc. The offices were a dump and the bathrooms were disgusting. There were 2 reasons for this. First, the company was small and growing and somewhat cash poor. Second, the owner was so cheap. In my time there, he would frequently make comments like, "Offices don't make me money, and bathrooms don't make me money," which, on the surface, is true. However, people don't like working a dump. I had a job in IT and we would end up cleaning the bathrooms on a rotation. I'm not above scrubbing a toilet, but no one told me when I was hired that I'd have to wipe up piss. I might have reconsidered taking that job. Over the next couple of years, the company did grow and they did hire a cleaning company and they did invest in the offices, but the first 12 months or so were not entirely what I expected, especially coming from a company that prided itself on nice, clean, modern facilities. I will say this though, the owner's cheap mentality was a continual roadblock for me in my time there. I eventually became director of operations, and it was a constant challenge to deal with his step over a dollar to pick up a dime method. Here are some examples of his idiocy. Only the owner, the VP, and the financial guy were allowed to have company credit cards. I was a director of operations with 65 employees under me, and I had to get petty cash from accounting or use my own credit card and get reimbursed for any events or spending or meals. Most people were not allowed to book their own flights. It wasn't until later on that I was able to book my own flights. The entire purchasing department and none of the sales force were allowed to book their own flights. The owner did it, and if he could save $60 by adding 2 layovers or making your flight a red-eye, he would do it. Never mind the lost productivity and what that costs, we saved $60 on your ticket. Kept an opiate addict around because he was a good welder and carpenter and would fix or build anything the owner wanted on the weekend for $60, a pack of smokes and a case of beer. The addict regularly destroyed equipment, stole, lied, and worked whatever hours he wanted. When my predecessor tried to fire him, the owner overruled, and after that, the addict could basically do whatever he wanted because there were clearly no repercussions. I did eventually fire this guy, and I still have the voicemail saved where he called up and begged for his job back after he had threatened violence against me and vandalism against my property. We had a plow truck that was in need of a wiring harness. The addict employee mentioned above had done something while borrowing the truck with the owner's permission, and the truck caught on fire. The truck was an older V30 Chevy truck, but it was in decent shape and worked well. I ordered a wiring harness from Painless and figured I'd install it on the weekend and get the truck working again for $600. The owner traded that truck and $5,000 for a 2002 F250 5.4 XL regular cab with 275,000 miles on it. The Super Duty frame and suspension were completely rotten, and the truck needed a rear end, brakes, brake lines, and fuel lines in the first year. I'm sure the guy that made that trade laughed all the way to the bank, coming away with $5,000 and a clean square-body Chevy 1-ton that had a SM465, NP205, 14-bolt, Dana 60, and only needed a wiring harness to be back on the road. I wasn't allowed to hire a lawn care company to do the mowing, so we had to have employees do it. The owner bought a used $400 riding mower that had 4 flat tires, no belts, and no battery from, you guessed it, the addict guy. I was not allowed to have a company credit card, but I did have a company Lowe's card, so I bought a cheap push mower over there and we used that to mow until years later when I was allowed to hire a mowing company. I was recently, roughly 2 months ago, given a job offer from a company I was really interested in. The job sounded great, was in a career path I was originally hoping for when graduating, and was back in my hometown so I could see some old friends and family regularly. When they made me an offer, it was a pretty big pay cut from what I'm currently making. The actual salary would have been flat out even. I hate my current job, so that would have been okay by me. However, I would be losing a week of vacation, a week paid sick time, getting slightly worse benefits, and half of what my current company offers in $401,000 matching. When I asked what was available for negotiation, they got mad at me. In fact, they expected me to make this life-altering decision in 24 hours with little to no questions asked, and got even madder that I wanted to negotiate my life instead of just say yes or no. So I ended up just walking away. I hate my current bosses, but not enough to walk away from 4 weeks of vacation and an extra week of sick leave, and especially not for, given the signs, people who will treat me the exact same way as my bosses. If they ask you to pay for training, that's usually a red flag that it's an MLM or pyramid scheme. If they ask you to buy stuff on commission and that it's your job to resell it, big ol' red flag. I've had job interviews where the whole company gave me a weird vibe. Lots of psychology questions like, do you like to be in control? While sitting in an office building with zero privacy. All of the office's glass walls so everyone could see everyone else. Needless to say, I didn't accept their offer. Master's degree preferred for an entry-level job. But the worst part is that they're getting what they ask for. I've been applying to so many master's degree preferred entry-level jobs, and always getting passed over 4 other people with a master's that have 10+ years of experience and are perfectly willing to take entry-level pay. Need someone who is a rock star in fill in the blank? Really? Do you want someone who is just charismatic? That's it? What does that even mean? Sure, I can do tons of cocaine at work and be charismatic as hell. Doubt that would help your company. To be fair, if you can sleep on the floor of a van in a Walmart parking lot after traveling 6 states with 5 other egotistical dudes, you can probably hack it at whatever terrible job they're hiring for. I used to manage restaurants, and in my time doing so, I swore I would never put on our reader board anything like, now hiring all shifts, open interview dates, etc. The closest I ever got was putting up one time, now hiring 1 great associate. And your point is both for potential employees and consumers, because I'll never willingly go to a restaurant that says, now hiring all shifts. I can only assume the service will be, if for no other reason than lack of experience. When looking at compensation figures, bear in mind that up to X includes the number 0. My favorite is up to X or more, which means literally nothing. A more fun version of this I like is that I'm typing the sentence at a fraction of the speed of light. It's common in my industry for you to be interviewed separately by 3 or 4 different people. They will typically all be people that you'll be working with or for example, the hiring manager and 2 teammates. I've taken to asking each of them to describe what they see as the day-to-day duties and priorities of the role. If they don't align, it's a warning sign that no one knows exactly what they're hiring for. Requires 10 years experience, 2 master's degrees. Start, $8.50 an hour. You also need to wipe everyone's asses and make tea and coffee. They're unbelievable. They expect way too much from people, especially if the job has only existed for a few years. If they're looking for a large number of people to fill multiple positions, typically means that something happened to make a lot of people quit, or means that the company has a high turnover rate. Typically, yes, but not always. I was part of a small startup customer support lead for a software as a service product. We needed to grow from 6 to 100 people. We were then bought by one of the biggest names in software. All those people now work for a major software company. If you're expected to work right off without sufficient training, it reflects poorly on the company's management and likely also means that they don't care about the employees. I had a cashier job kind of like this. I was partnered with existing cashiers for the first couple of weeks for them to train me. It sort of made sense in context. Management had no idea how the POSs worked, so cashiers had to train each other. But it also created this disconnect when one of us hit an issue we couldn't solve, or when customers asked us to perform a transaction we'd never done before. Air miles was a huge, frustrating thing. Not only that, but I was there for about 9 months and had been promised OHSA training within the first 3. Never got it. Quit for a number of reasons, but the point is, when you minimum wagers are training each other for no extra pay, something has gone wrong. As a software developer, I ask to see the office while the devs are at work. If it's too quiet, I see that as a bad sign. I look at seeing people pair programming or discussing design decisions, doing code reviews, etc. I'm looking for a relaxed but engaging atmosphere. The red flags for me are people sitting alone at their computers, staring desperately at the screen, unable to seek help, everyone under so much workload that the office is deathly quiet. I want to see people helping each other. Also, I want to see automated unit testing, and reasonably well-spec'd out stories before they go into points poker. The code should be clean, easily read, and comments used sparingly to illustrate not what but why they've decided to do things that way. I want to see automated build and deployment systems in place. In the car park, I don't want to see the boss's car is many times the worth of the scrappiest car in the car park. That's a sign that the boss is exploiting the workers. Infrastructure. The elevators and toilets should work, and there should be a kitchen with a working sink and microwave. Flexi time should mean flexi time, not you have to convince the partners that you'll not abuse the privilege of working an hour earlier or later. And once you do, your new times are carved in stone for all eternity. If the job asks for money to begin, we'll hide this behind, we just need $90 for the piss test and $180 for the marketing training. Definitely not talking from my scammed personal experience. This is my #1 red flag. I've actually never seen this flag on a legit business before. Do you have to buy a kit? Scam. You need to pay the company or one that they are contracted for training first? Scam. Need to buy job supplies? Still a scam. Any legit business is forced to compensate you. If you have to buy any product or service to start making money, it is a pyramid scheme or MLM, multi-level marketing, that has a less than 1% chance at best of making you pennies per hour if you continue the chain by defrauding others. Unfortunately, I have worked for a couple of places that hired roughly 75 plus people 3 times per week at several locations just to keep up with the turnover. That's crazy. Was this in hospitality or retail? The trucking industry is cutthroat. They will kick you out the door for nothing because there is always someone to replace you. When they can't return a call or keep you updated about your onboarding. This, and when they leave you hanging for 3 months. I've had a phone call from a company I had an interview with 3 months prior to that without hearing a word, and I was already at a new job and I said, sorry, should have gotten to me sooner. What's a red flag when looking for a job? Part 1. I had a team lead interview me for a contract once say bluntly, you don't want to work here, it's horrible. He was right and still undersold the experience somehow. And you still took the job? Come on, man. Temporary 3 to 6 month contract. I completed the project and moved on to the next contract. Places who always say they're hiring and always taking applications, but you never actually see anyone new being trained or anything. It means people are quitting constantly and management isn't hiring new people, so they are critically understaffed on top of poorly managed. I turned down a second interview for a position in which the interviewer said something to the effect of, if your boss emails you on a Friday night, you don't have to respond, but you know how that looks. Made it pretty clear that they expect work to be your first priority. It looks like I don't want that job, lol. This is also why I left my job. I don't want a job where I still have to work at home during rest days without getting paid. Boy, their audacity to make you do that is insane. I said I can work under pressure, not in sickness and in health till death do us part. Hiring lots of people in the same position, everyone who calls gets a job, either means the job is nonsense or they're setting you all up to compete for the actual job. I had this once. Turned out it was commission only, door-to-door vacuum sales. I did that for a month. My breaking point was when I was told I couldn't carry any water with me in what is essentially desert climate in the middle of summer. Was told to request a glass of water from random strangers. Same if I needed to use the bathroom. I wound up so parched I was risking real dehydration, and the other salespeople had the nerve to drink all my water. Oh, and I sold a grand total of 3 vacuums. I actually have 5 sales, but I quit on a Friday, and by Monday they claimed my last 2 sales were cancelled, and I now owe them something like $150 for accessories. I convinced them to zero out my entire account and just close it. ETA, since I have a lot of replies, asking which vacuum, it was Kurt B. When they nonsense talk about previous employees, they were going to do it to you. Same goes for them insulting current employees behind their backs. I saw that during my orientation. 2 supervisors were loudly talking about how useless an employee was after they got off the phone with him. Even if it's true, the fact that they don't care who hears them is a sign of a toxic work environment. Typical behavior of managers who like to deflect blame for their own mistakes onto employees. Basically, a symptom of a terrible boss. When they say you could be earning 6 figures in less than a year. When the posting lists the salary range as $50,000 to $300,000, that means it's an all-commission sales job. Also, the only way you will see 6 figures will be to rob a bank on the way home from work. Always ask them why the person you are replacing left the job. The way they answer this could be a red flag. I took a security guard job in college as a part-time gig. In the interview, the owner said the guy I was placing was just lazy. On my first day, I asked one of my coworkers, and it turns out he was shot in the face while on duty. Too lazy to drive himself to the hospital, I guess? If the guy couldn't even keep bullets out of his own body, how can he be expected to keep people out of the building? Making jokes about overtime and crunch time. Guaranteed it's going to be nights and weekends are optional, but not actually optional place. I went to an interview where the guy said, "We don't end the day until everyone is done, and sometimes that takes another hour on a busy day." Then my genius brain said, "Yeah, I don't want to work constantly overtime." What was I thinking, expecting to go home when my contract says I go home? In reality, maybe an hour overtime can easily turn into 2 hours overtime every day. Having to pretend this is normal is so toxic. Initially unpaid, but will result in full-time offer upon completion of XYZ. This will be an excellent chance to expand your portfolio and gain lots of exposure to leading global brands. The graphic designer here, my favorite response to this? You can die from exposure. Earning potential is stressed over the current salary. I applied to a place where they were offering me 30% less than what I was currently making. They said, "That's because you'll be making that up in your performance bonus, plus more." Hard pass for me on that one. Such a slap in the face of an offer. This was a red flag I had during an interview process once. I was doing a phone interview for an IT position, and the person I was interviewing with basically changed the details of the job during the interview. Instead of the first shift hours the position promised, he immediately went into saying it would be 6+ months before the opportunity for the first shift would even be a possibility. Also, he was big into asking how dedicated I was to jobs. The idea of weekend shifts, again, not in the original description, kept coming up, and how everyone had to be a team player and help out on weekends when needed. The kicker was when he started talking about how many hours he worked. He was bragging that he was up at 6 a.m. every day working. Then he'd go into the office for the day, come home to see his family for dinner, and get right back to work until 10 to 11 p.m. every night. I had never been turned off from a job faster in my life. He asked me to think things over, and he'd send me some paperwork via email. Needless to say, I called him the next morning and declined the job. It was the worst interview process I'd ever been in. A couple of things. Open interviews. Admittedly, I've fallen for this a few times, but I was young and stupid. It's clear they have a high turnover, so they're trying to secure as many people as they can. Most of the time, these open interview jobs don't have salaries, just commission. Refusal or reluctancy to share details over the phone. This is what usually ends up in you turning up to an open interview. If they withhold information about the role, what you'll be doing, etc., that's a huge red flag. They just want to get you in the door for an interview to pressure you into joining. Looking for rock stars in the job description, unless of course the posting is in fact for a position to be a rock star. Similarly, ads that read along the lines of, "Do you like sports? Come be a part of our team. We're laid back and have fun. We want all of our MVPs to succeed, so we work hard and we play hard too." If they're trying to sell you on the work environment in the ad, most of the time, you should run. I'm sure there are exceptions, but most of the time, you can substitute rock stars and sports and MVPs and all these ads interchangeably, with all of it loosely translating to, "We're gonna load a bunch of you up in a van at the butt crack of dawn to drop in neighborhoods for door-to-door cold calls selling cutlery." If you ask them what the pay is and they start off with what you could be making after so much time, and they start rambling about the raising process, run the other way. During my last interview for an entry-level, semi-skilled press operator position, the HR guy says my pay will be like this. If you hit your rate every day, factor in your attendance bonus, then if you go over rate, we'll pay you piece rate. They don't, I checked. And if the packing line gets your orders out on time and your quality is high enough and we don't get docked with any fees, a process over which I'll have no control after I wrap my pallet, you'll be making $15.20 an hour. Or more if you sign up for Saturdays. But that's not what I asked. I asked what my base pay was going to be, to which he replied, $10.61 per hour. No, thank you. I've never heard such a complete pile of runaround nonsense. I got a call from a subway I applied to tell me my interview was in 10 minutes. That was the first I heard from them after submitting my application. So, years ago, my old company was hiring a mechanical engineer job, but the director of the department suddenly had a family emergency and had to go out of town the next day. They called the last applicant and said, "Can you come in and interview? Like now?" The candidate explained that he was out and about and couldn't get dressed or anything. The director basically said, "Don't care." That's how the dude that got the job got to interview in a black band t-shirt and ripped jeans. So before you red flag it, make sure that a sudden interview isn't warranted. High staff turnover. There's a place near me that's always hiring high-level tech folks, and I mean always. Just makes me think, meat grinder. Probably pays an absolute killing, but you're chained to your work laptop 24/7. If the job description has about 20 items, of which one is sales, your job is going to be sales. If the job description has multiple items, then the majority of your duty is going to be the worst one of those items. A bit like occasional weekend means occasional weekend off. A manager who doesn't really interview you or doesn't take the interview seriously. They're on their phone the whole time, don't ask any questions, are too casual. Edited, too casual doesn't mean creating a relaxed environment or rapport with the interview candidate. Too casual in my experience was the guy, director of marketing, wear jeans with a hole near the crotch and sitting with his legs open, on his phone the whole time, spitting chew into a can on his desk. Or the guys who have interviewed me and littered the interview with F-bombs and other vulgarities, or talked nonsense about our known common acquaintances. Things like that. If it feels like you have the job before your interview. I once applied to a trainee position, I got to the interview and it felt like I had already got the position and the meeting was just for details. It was weird. He looked at my docs more as a formality, but apart from the excessive praise, I was never actually asked anything. I was told I would do a week trial with only travel expenses paid. During that week, there was no training or anything. I heard some not nice things, also some illegal things whilst there. The boss was making plans to go out of the country for an extended period within 2 months, and I'd be taking over for him as well as expected to bring in clients too. Also, I wasn't deemed to be working fast enough, and therefore they wanted to pay me less than £4 an hour. I didn't go back. An employer who treats you like they were doing you a favor. With good servant leadership, it should be the other way around. An unclear job description, or a job description that includes too many duties. Not being offered the opportunity to see the working areas or talk to people who would be your peers. Just generally trying to feel out whether or not they have things under control or not. I don't want to walk into a garbage show. We work hard and play hard. It actually means all work and for sure no play. Translation, you will work 60 plus hours a week and you are expected to come to the company happy hour whether you drink or not. Also, we all stay here too much then go get hammered because we hate our spouses and children and will do anything to avoid going home. I arrived for an interview not too long ago. I showed up 15 minutes early and had all my certs to prove training. I waited over 20 minutes before the secretary led me to a conference room. Waited another 40 minutes and got fed up. The quality manager walked in as I was getting up to leave. He was very offended when I told him he had wasted my time and I would never accept a position after being left to wait almost an hour while having an appointment. Drove an hour and a half to a job interview once. The interviewer was traveling and I was supposed to meet them in the business center of their hotel. Waited for a little over an hour. Nobody showed or called me. Tried calling them, straight to voicemail. I got fed up and left. 30 minutes into my drive home, I got a call back. They wanted to know where I was. Apparently, they were in an important meeting that ran long, and couldn't call me or email me to let me know. I got calls from them for a month trying to set up an interview despite me telling them I wasn't interested every single time. We are a family here, which means this is how they try to make up for the garbage pay and long hours. This is the one I was looking for. Yes, it's a family in the sense that the company expects me to be willing to do anything to help you and your company anytime, anywhere, anyhow. You and your brothers and sisters, aka the other overworked, unappreciated PNs, are conditioned to work harder to help each other out. The problem here is that the only people who benefit are the people at the top.
What's something in your room right now that most people probably don't have in theirs? An uncut currency sheet. It's 50 $1 bills that were never cut when they came out of the US Mint. I have 2 $1 bills whose serial number is directly after each other, but yours sounds way cooler. If you found those out in the wild, that's awesome, but it's pretty common to get sequential bills if you're getting them from a bank, especially the larger ones. A pleasant assortment of didgeridoos, whereas most people only have a mediocre assortment of didgeridoos. A ship compass. Now you know which way your house is going. Perfect for strapping thousands of balloons to it and traveling to Paradise Falls. A working iPod from 2004. Still have mine. It's the U2 Special Edition. I believe it still works. 8 different copies of The Secret Garden by Frances Burnett. I have a similar collection of Alice in Wonderland books. A balloon that was inflated a couple of days before I was born, 17 years later, and it has barely lost any air. But, what happens when it does deflate? I mean, will you deflate too? You either die normal or live long enough to become deflated, I guess. A custom-made wand from the Harry Potter universe. I worked on the Fantastic Beasts 2 film, part of the Harry Potter universe, and was gifted it by the director and producer. It has my name on it too. I got an autograph from Chef Anthony Bourdain. Kitchen Confidential was an amazing read. 4 guitars that I built by hand from blocks of wood. That is so cool. Is that one in the back a hollow body Epiphone? How does it sound? It is a hollow body that I built, Jag style body with 335 wood thickness specs. Then I used the trestle bracing system inside like a Gretsch, but with rosewood. I ran LEDs through the fretboard, so I'm putting in some HD copper shielding right now because the blinking lights were coming into the pickups. A dictionary from 1899. Wow, any words in there that aren't used today, or do you not know? I haven't really been able to check it out for a while, over a fear of it falling apart if I open it. A Geiger counter. So, how much radiation is in your room? 3.6 Runken. Not great, but not terrible. A Nintendo Power Glove. I love the Power Glove, it's so bad. A cot. I don't use a mattress, I use a Coleman cot. I've done this for 4, almost 5 years. Why? I can't speak for Rob, but for me, it was the only thing I could afford post-divorce. Well, the only thing I could afford after getting the truly essential items. A beanbag chair, an Xbox 360 and a 70-inch plasma TV. A picture of Prince Harry edited onto Umbridge's body. Prince Umbridge. An unopened box of Windows 95. How have you been able to resist this long? I find the box design visually pleasing. I also love the novelty of having an unused physical version of outdated software. I have a large storage container filled to the top with McDonald's toys. Before my grandfather passed away, he would go and get a cup of coffee every morning and would get me a toy from there when he got a coffee. I've kept them ever since. I can't bring myself to part with them. I have full collections of the Monsters Inc. toys, the Lilo and Stitch toys, Winnie the Pooh, Beanie Babies, etc. 90s and early 2000s toys. That man was a saint and my hero. A plus-minus 100-year-old original framed photograph of my great-grandfather. Honestly, I would immensely be impressed if anyone had that. That and a plastic nun finger puppet. I have a glass milk container filled with the heads of action figures. What the flip? Why? My garage was filled with years and years worth of my children's toys. Many of those I gave away to thrift stores. Some of the smaller ones I placed in glass containers as decoration and a reminder of the years of my children playing with their toys. One of the things I found in many of the totes of toys were broken action figures. A lot of heads, so I thought it would be cool to use one glass container just for action figure heads. About 80 rubber ducks. James Veitch, is this you? Lol, no, but he inspired my collection. A magnet that has a cow with the words Moo Mitch. A sword with a snakeskin scabbard. Ooh, that sounds interesting. And like the sword might cut through the scabbard accidentally. Fun fact, a scabbard is a hard, rigid case for blades that are usually composed of wood slats wrapped in something like canvas or leather. A sheath is made of only soft material like leather. It's basically impossible to cut through a scabbard, whereas a sheath is a bit more feasible by nature of the design. Fun fact number 2, you're beautiful. Have a great day. An antique ship anchor from the year 1597, dredged up from the River Mars. It's not a huge anchor from a full-sized man-o'-war or something. Those were the size of a house. I think this was from a fishing vessel or a small trade vessel for river trade here in the Netherlands. Not found by me, unfortunately, but I bought it from the man who did, found in the 70s. The date it was made is on the anchor, and the mark on it is a kind of a house mark. These marks were used by rich, but not noble families. No coat of arms to mark stuff that was theirs. around 60 kilograms, but it's a guess. Height, 124 centimeters, width, 81 centimeters. A skinned and dissected Furby. Are you making a long Furby? I have a 6-foot tall skeleton on a movable stand next to my bed. He's made of plastic. He's not real. I don't care if he watches me masturbate or have sex. I'm a girl. No, I'm not in the medical field, I'm in education. Please stop asking me these questions. Lol. Doesn't it ever get creepy? It used to be at the foot of my bed and it freaked me out because I saw it all night long, but I moved it to the head of my bed, which sounds way creepier, but I don't see it as often, so it's less weird. It's just in the corner of my eye when I'm watching TV and stuff. I did turn his face away from me so he can't watch me sleep. He gets to look out the window. I figure if anyone tries to break in, they're gonna see the skeleton in the window and get freaked out. A Winnie the Pooh book translated into Latin. Perfect for reading to the young demon under your bed. A mint condition, first edition Marchamp Pokemon card. Shiny, of course. Well, I have a Stonjourner VMAX Japanese Rainbow Rare Full Art card. I can provide pictures if you want to see it. It's very shiny. A school desk from the early 20th century. I have one of these. I bought second-hand for $5. The metal-framed, wood-seated kind with the chair attached. Although ours is probably from around 1960-ish, my kid has slowly decorated with lots of paint, markers and stickers, and it looks like a hippie desk now. White Tiger Megazord with all the red spheres. I don't think everyone here appreciates the rarity of all the red spheres being intact. A Raven Skull. Epic. This one checks out as well. A collection of human teeth stuck on a candle. Wow. You can join the cult with the Raven and Goat Skull people. Don't forget the mini cauldron, folks. My appendix. Hopefully. Yeah, it's a little scary when you see it from far. That's why it's hidden somewhere in my room. A piece of the Berlin Wall. I have a chunk on my dresser. I got from my mom when we visited Germany last summer because she told me stories of when she lived there, touching the wall was a quick way to get shot. I wanted her to be able to touch the wall and not get shot, so I brought some wall home for her. I have multiple bottles of wine, 3 liters or larger. A shelf was full of scuba equipment, 3 fridges, a surprising amount of Malagasy Ariari. Hey, what scuba kit do you rock? Quite a lot. A regulator, Mara's Abyss BCDs, Mari's XR Blue Camo, BPW, and Cressy Ultralight fins. Boscia Aquabionics, and a smaller, more generic fin. Computer, Sunto Ionco. Plus all the boots, wetsuits, accessories, etc. It's more of the fact I have them all on display that is irregular. My room has too many walls, so one is a scuba display. A tiny glow-in-the-dark baby Jesus statue from the Vatican. A plant that was grown from an actual grocery store pineapple cutting. I don't have one in my bedroom, but I do have 2 in the house. They're perfect, low-maintenance houseplants. A giant Jamaican banana. Saw 2 kids walking through a trailer park a few weeks ago carrying one. I also have a giant stuffed gorilla as big as I am. I named it Coco, after the sign language gorilla. Coco is right next to the Jamaican banana with its arm around it. A full-tang, sharp, fully operational battle axe, a 14-foot rope dart, and functional flintlock pistols. Are you a D&D character? Dude has to roll for strength and dexterity on a regular basis. A basket of my sister's cleaned laundry that she has yet to come pick up. Before you go all Sweet Home Alabama on me, it's only in my room because our cats will end up sleeping on it otherwise, and my bedroom's the only safe place it could go. A cauldron. Wait, what? Why? For witchcraft, of course. It's a little iron one, fits in the palm of my hand. I use it for burning herbs and incense. Christmas tree. My father just got rid of a Christmas tree he had in his house for 1.5 years. Edit. He even decorated it for different holidays. I can't believe it took him that long. Growing up, my family did that. We left it up for 12 years. As kids, we got really sad when the Christmas tree had to come down, so our parents figured out, why not just leave it up? It made an excellent conversation piece, but it was also really fun finding different decorations to put on it for different holidays. My favorite was the giant pair of sunglasses we put on them during the summer. My husband. I hope, at least, Nope, I've got him too. To choose this man's husband. Sign from a now closed military area. It says, photography prohibited. Is photography allowed in your room then? Only if the military authority does not find out. A coffee cup with human teeth. Before you ask, they're not mine. That just makes me more scared. A big sign that says, take no prisoners, that I got from my old job at a well-known chicken tender fast food place that rhymes with causing rains. Am I the only one that can't guess the restaurant name? 2 5-day-old kittens. Cat tax. This blew up. To answer a question, we don't know where the moms went or are. The kittens are orphans from different litters that were brought into the shelter separately. One person said a mom was hit by a car. We do encourage people who find kittens this young to leave them where they are and wait to see if mom returns. Alive? Just making sure. Yes, they are foster kittens. They need feedings every 2 hours so they can't stay at the shelter overnight.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? I've posted this before, and I need to say first off the bat that this is about my best friend and she is the best person I know. I.e., not normally rich kid or anything. I was complaining about how I was short on money one month, just couldn't go out to eat, because I had to pay rent and pay for tag renewal all in the same paycheck. She looked at me, super seriously, and was like, "Don't worry, they send you those in the mail for free." After a long discussion, she learned that in fact, her mom had been paying for her new tags every year. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub. The biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied, and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 a.m. because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid. He ends up embarrassing his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some garbage comment and goes back to the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son, when we offer to drag him out the rough way. He smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. Don't know if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy, I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks at me dead in the eye and says, "I don't even know why I bother. My mom never cuts off the crust." I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs like, "Is this girl for real?" Obviously to the tone of it, she says, "I know, right?" Then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something, cause this thing is too stereotypical to be real, and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a, well, look. So I said forget it and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student ID card and bought a crap ton of french fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade and it was stacked like a Dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just want to say someone appreciated that sandwich. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence. But he had very little sense of what the value of a dollar really was, since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good. So we all rocked up to this place, and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60, which as poor uni students we couldn't afford. But when he realized this, he was so embarrassed he got his folks to pay for it. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independence away from his family, and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. A 12-year-old family friend got an iPhone XS for his birthday, then deliberately shattered his iPhone 8. I saw a 7-year-old daughter having iPhone XS with Dior ostrich skin cover. The cover was more expensive than the phone. Mommy got it for her birthday. I feel like you shouldn't give stuff like that to kids. In high school, a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car, 3 years old,
that his parents gave him but he hated, so his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year car to incentivize him to drive better. "Hey, son, you wrecked your new car? Well, fine. We're getting a new one, hoping you'll drive better. Genius." I went to school with a kid who totaled his Escalade, and someone's private land, by off-riding in it. So it was replaced with an Audi, so they couldn't do it again. My mom's friend used to buy new clothes each season and throw out the old ones. She had to be taught by her husband to save them for the next year. My cousin's wife grew up in Ohio, middle class at best, but when he got a high-paying job, she immediately started custom ordering their daughter's clothes, with everything having her name stitched on it and throwing away my mom's gifts. I worked with this kid who was a good kid but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant, and the sommelier said, "Certainly, sir." Then the sommelier whispered, "Just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, "Is that a lot?" The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once, he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills, and she deposited $20,000 into his account. My friend's parents had a dilemma because they both bought each other a new Mercedes for Valentine's Day. This is actually cute. Yeah, I was just thinking that this is simultaneously super wholesome and extremely privileged. A guy looked at my $2,000 beater car in college and commented that it must have been really cheap and guessed $15,000. Here's a doozy for you. My roommate's girlfriend went to a different college than us. She was visiting for the weekend, constantly saying things like, "Oh, she would never be a KD at my school," and just generally putting down anything she saw. Walking through the parking lot to the bars, she looked at a beat-up car, which happened to be my girlfriend's, and says, "If my parents gave me that car to go to college, I'd throw the keys in a river." She didn't have a car. When my roommate said, "At least they have a car," she flipped out on him. I worked at Starbucks, and we hired a new guy who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach and hand him a pair of gloves, and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day, lol. When I was in boarding school, one of my co-boarders handed me some mail saying, "Do you notice anything special about this envelope?" When I checked it out, I realized his face was on the stamp. He was royalty. This sounds like it's out of Coming to America. And when I say he has his own money, I mean he has his own money. Slaps bill down with a picture of Eddie Murphy's face on it. I went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets, and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." The rich kid responds, "I promise you, we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got me. He really believed he was placating her with that response. There's gotta be a German word for something being funny because the other party is aloof to their own behavior. My brother works at a rehab center for the kids of wealthy parents. He's always got stories, but the one that sticks with me the most was a kid who was in trouble with the law and doing rehab before his court appearances. You know, to look like a better person and hopefully the judge would go easier on him. He was mopey one day, and my brother asks him what's wrong. The kid starts talking about how tough the whole experience has been for him, how it's been so hard on his family that his parents had to sell his house to pay for his rehab. My brother felt sympathetic and says, "Damn, that sucks that your parents had to sell their house over this." To which the kid corrected him, "No, they kept their house. They had to sell mine." Well, this is a less version of a spoiled kid if the parents actually punished the kid. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble, so they cut it to $90 a week. How old was she? Assuming this was high school, how did she manage to spend $30K a year? She was a teenager. She lived in Manhattan, so that explains a bit. One girl from my high school got breast implants for her 18th birthday. Her mom joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new $90,000 Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. I think I saw that movie. And then the daughter's boyfriend comes over, right? I saw this one too. The daughter isn't home, but the mom says he can wait there for her. I work for a dentist, and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around in some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for, and he just repeated himself, and she gave it to him. So the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture, but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year, and instead of staying in a dorm, they demanded a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first, she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained, and she caved. This will be a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances, and from a young age, got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes, he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't in his classroom, I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence, except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city, and I had to park on the street. A couple of times, I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the parking meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.4 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education, someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away and I hope he's doing well. This kid back in high school was whining. I mean, literally whimpering, that he had to wait for something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. If that was me, I'd be surprised it only took 6 weeks to custom-build a car and ship it from another country. I don't really know anything about cars, that just seems like a short time period to custom-build and ship such a large item. I've waited longer than that for 99p things on eBay.
What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? Part 2. My fiance's cousin. He managed to crash 4 cars while still in high school because his father would replace them. When he moved on to college, he got kicked out of several apartments for owning a dog when they weren't permitted. He told me he didn't care though, since his father also funded his continuous stream of new housing. From what I last heard, his father is now paying for his long-standing cocaine habit. Do these parents actually care about their kids? I don't understand how out of touch as a parent you have to be to keep buying your child brand new vehicles every time they crash one due to him or her being reckless. How do you not know how to punish them, or make them work until they pay it off or something? I just do not get how you cannot understand this. Someone's sister got $600 shoes, so the parents got the other kid's shoes of the same price to stop their complaining. Holy somehow this is the one that got me. I mean, this is a common problem for any family. One kid gets one thing and the other sibling throws a tantrum because they also want that thing. The only difference being that it's usually cheap things instead of $600 shoes. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. First time I hung out at his place, I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was, some even unopened. I showed him some rare cards that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things, he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, Mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor, and I'm just standing there over him in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. The kid wasn't even rich either, if I remember correctly. Both of his parents were cops. Babysat some rich kids. A couple of gems were when we were watching a movie and she said someone was ugly because they were poor. Another was that they left their stove at the side of the road for hobos. The kid was about 11. I nanny rich kids and I know exactly what attitude you mean. Mine thinks that anyone who catches the bus is dangerous and poor and will kidnap them. They mocked a girl who got a scholarship to their expensive school so much that she transferred back to a public school. The mother has me sit in the house doing nothing for up to 8 hours when they have tradespeople in because she's convinced they will steal. The mother also declutters their old crap by dumping it on their cleaning lady because she knows all the refugees in X city, and there are people who will really enjoy this stuff. It's a nice idea, but we're talking about old underwear with no elastic, soft toys with giant stains and missing limbs, school bags that are so old the plastic material is hardened and cracked off, and felt pens with no lids that dried out years ago. She just has no concept of what real people's lives are actually like to think that they might want this garbage. Went to school with a crazy rich kid. His parents got divorced and each decided to buy his love. Mommy owned a real estate agency, so she got him a license and spoon-fed him enough sales for a 6-figure income. The dad then bought him a magazine. Yes, the dad bought a magazine for his 24-year-old cokehead son to run. Worked about as well as you'd imagine. I have a cousin like that. Her parents have always just bought whatever job she's kind of interested in. In high school, they opened a Dairy Queen so she would have a place for her first job. They bought her a clothing store and an interior design business / home decor store. And now that she's got kids and less time to work, they bought like 4 condos for her to use as Airbnb properties. The only good thing is when she gets bored, her stepbrother takes over and finds qualified people to run the businesses, so other people are ending up with nice jobs. So, my best friend's wife teaches at a ritzy $40K per year private school. As in $40,000 a year for elementary and middle school. I think the high school is like $50K plus. Well, she teaches 7th or 8th grade, I can't remember, and she said she always goes around the class after the summer break and asks them what they did over the summer. And she particularly remembers one kid complaining about how much his summer sucked because he was stuck on his parents' yacht all summer and they didn't even take it anywhere cool. Just Italy. Young celebrity posts a pic of a house they just bought. That house isn't that nice. My cousin's house is way nicer. My cousins live in a mansion in Tampa, Florida. It always rocks their world when they visit me in my studio apartment in a Miami ghetto and use my 3 megabyte per second internet. Rich relatives don't mean you're rich too. This girl would always brag about how she'd been to every continent except Antarctica, and that she's visited so many countries. Then she wondered why people called her the rich kid and insisted she wasn't rich. To be fair, I am in no way rich, yet have been to every continent except Antarctica and dozens of countries. You just need to get a job on a cruise ship. Low pay, long, stressful hours, but perks like that. Guy buys $500 headphones from a vending machine because he lost his old pair. Like, who buys from a tech vending machine impulsively? It was on a university campus, not airport, and the dude bought Beats. So, not an audiophile or noise cancelling. I was tossing the football in my friend's place, and we almost hit his expensive TV. His response was, "Don't worry, my dad will just buy me another one." Was it a flat screen or a CRT? Because I have never been able to break a CRT, even with a bunch of pinball balls I found. It was a mini screen in his bedroom. Luckily, the only rich kids I knew were the most outstandingly well-behaved boys I've ever met. I was a youth leader in a ministry for middle schoolers, and I think the worst it ever got was them being mildly disruptive at times. But these kids had a literal half-sized basketball court in their basement, along with a basement the size of a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment, an arcade, a fully stocked second fridge. Don't even get me started on the house itself and the yard. This place easily would list as at least $1 million home. But they would share with all the kids in the group and never ever look down on anyone for not having money like them. These boys even helped me change a flat tire on my car because they felt it was useful to know how. They literally could probably afford a tow truck and a tire repair all in the same day if it ever happened to them. They were so well grounded that it made me feel like I was the spoiled brat at times. I looked up this estimate of the house. It was between 1.4 to 1.9 million, but the next most expensive house I found in the area was listed for 1.4. The average home in this particular town costs between 400 to 500k, so it's still pretty lavish compared to what everyone else around them has. I've seen this Aussie guy in a Thai pub in Koh Samui. He wanted to show bar girls that he's rich and lit up his cigarette using a burning 1,000 baht bill. He probably did not know how Thais love their king, and that the king just recently died, and his face is on the bill. The rich kid got him but kicked so hard. Sorry for my English, but hopefully you can understand what I mean. One of my friend's friends ended up paying for a night out of food and entertainment. He'd go up before we got the bill and just pay. No matter how much we argued with him and tried to pay him back, he wouldn't take it. Nice dude, mad baller, rich. When I was in college and in various groups that interacted with people with established careers, they, the people with careers, would do this for us. Not all the time, just every now and then go cover everyone's tab for whatever outing we were at. Honestly, it taught me a lot more about sharing what I had with people than it made me feel like I was a poor college student, but it had a lot to do with the attitude. Most of the time, when it happened, they'd tell everyone goodnight, not make a scene, and do it behind our backs and leave. We'd go to close out and the waiter or waitress would be like, "Oh no, Bob or Mary already took care of it." Being humble college students, and usually sometimes knowing these servers, led to us just tipping on the usual bill, and for a lot of these people it became an unspoken social agreement that they would cover us, and we would pay it forward by making sure our regular servers got taken care of. Adrian Broner, a boxer. Though he was not born rich, but became rich in his 20s, if you're not going by what Felix Dennis considers rich. He was supposed to be the next boxing superstar, but was beaten badly and exposed. He put out a video of him in line at Walmart. He paid with a $100 bill and threw the change on the ground, saying he is AB and only deals in hundreds. This is a man who had 7 children by 8 women at the age of 23 6 years ago, and who knows how many now. He had to settle a $1 million jewelry debt earlier this year. In middle school, we were asked to draw our homes for some assignment and hand it in at the end of class. A popular, extremely wealthy kid that sat behind me raised his hand and smugly asked the teacher for another sheet of paper because he couldn't draw it all on one page. His friends just snickered, but I was cringing. Even at 12, I remember thinking was such a snobby thing to say. I had a girl like that in French class high school. We had to draw and label our house floor plan in Francais. And Kat raised her hand and asks how many floors because she kind of lives in a mansion. For other purposes, Kat was pretty cool, but she bragged about her wealth a lot. I work at a country club, and on the 4th of July, while I was working, a little girl asked why we were closing at 7 instead of staying open all night. I told her I wanted to get to do sparklers and fireworks with my family, too. She thought about it, looked back at me and said, But y'all aren't real people? I just had to laugh and inform her I was indeed real, and all my co-workers weren't just the slaves of the country club. Wild man. Bragging is one of my pet peeves. There's a coworker that constantly brags of how her mom buys her purses, nails, and hair done. The coworker makes recent money. Why can't she buy her own and stop mooching and bragging? Or just enjoy it without bragging? I'm in my 30s and support myself, but my dad is insistent on buying me a car he can get a good deal on. I keep telling him no, but he's not going to stop until I give in. On the one hand, it's awesome. On the other hand, I hate the optics of Daddy buying me a car. What about that Dallas kid who killed those others in a drunken car wreck, then used the "I'm too rich for consequences" defense? One of his examples in his defense was he had never learned consequences. For example, that time his parents found him drunk driving with a naked 14-year-old in the back of the car. On an episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, there was a member named Taylor. Her husband committed suicide and their lifestyle changed significantly. She and her young daughter started flying commercial versus private, and her daughter asked why there were all these other people on their plane. One of the very few times I would be interested in watching one of those shows, to be honest. Probably too late to the party here, but I ended up at one of those fancy private universities. Coming from a small Ohio town, it resulted in a lot of culture shock. One of the most memorable moments was when I was eating breakfast at one of the campus restaurants, super early, before I opened the store I worked at, and there was a girl at a table with her friend, just completely broken down sobbing. She was basically incomprehensible. I immediately thought she must have lost a family member, and my heart broke for her. Until, through rolling tears, she managed to croak out, "It's just not fair! I asked for a Mercedes, and he got me a BMW!" Then just broke into guttural sobs. Meanwhile, I'm hoping my paycheck can cover an overdue oil change on my 1998 Plymouth Neon.
AskReddit. What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? Part 1. Flava Flav ate at the restaurant I worked at once. He made a huge deal about having to sit somewhere private because he didn't want any attention. When it came to paying his bill, he tried to pay with a prepaid Visa that did not have enough money on it. I saw him at a bar in New Orleans during the Jazz Fest once. My buddy insisted that we ask him if he wanted to smoke a joint with us. He declined, saying there were too many people around. Then he asked me if I wanted to buy him a drink. I also declined. My only experience with Guy Fieri thus far was cordial. I did a guest presentation for us and took plenty of photos. But every time there's a wildfire or other depressing thing going on around here, he has his second responder crew ready to feed and care for all the first responders. This needs to be higher up. People like to make fun of his persona, but he uses what he has to truly help others. Samuel L. Jackson at the Calgary Stampede in Canada. He was super nice. My family went up for it because my uncle is part of the committee that organizes the Stampede every year, and he got us VIP seating. I was a kid at the time, and I was like, "Does your wallet really say OBAMF?" He laughed and said he left that one at home. Of course, when I told the story at school, I told everyone his wallet did in fact say that. Glad to say he's from my hometown. Leslie Jordan is from your hometown too. Are you watching his hilarious Instagram posts every day? I think the whole country is. All of these were waiting tables. Waited on Gene Wilder for his birthday years ago. He was incredibly nice and laughed so hard he cried when I told him we had everlasting pistachio ice cream. Betty White was hilarious and tipsy after wine and would not stop flirting. If I had been 60 years older, Neil Patrick Harris was also graceful as humanly possible. Insisted we have a drink with his table while we waited on him, and tipped like a champ. Seth MacFarlane was amazing. Drew me an original cartoon and signed it there at the table. After paying and tipping 100%, he refused to let me buy him a shot of whiskey and instead bought me one, then invited us to meet him out later. I met Vin Diesel at a truck stop diner when I was a kid. It was like 4 a.m. and me, my grandpa, and Vin and his friend were the only ones in the diner, and we ended up getting sat at the table next to them. Vin and a friend were getting ready to go on some fishing trip, which was made obvious by the clothes they were wearing. My grandpa struck up a conversation about fishing with him, completely oblivious to who he was. He was a really nice guy and apparently knew a great deal about fishing techniques. I was a bit geeked out and didn't say much or contribute to the conversation, but I spent the next hour of our road trip explaining to my grandpa who Vin Diesel was and why it was a huge deal we just met him. Met Dave Chappelle a few years back. Long story short, a friend of a friend got me and 2 friends into an after party. We were sitting at the bar when his manager offered us some shots. We talked with his manager for a while. Then Dave sat down near us. Dave was kind of sitting by himself and he looks over at us and goes, "What's going on, fellas?" And we talked to him for about an hour. We thanked him for coming to our town, talked about music, sports, all kinds of stuff. Super cool dude, one of my favorite memories. Dude, to cement that Dave is a cool guy, my friends and I were at his Chicago show when he was supposed to film a special for HBO, and it was on my actual birthday. The venue was pretty intimate and only had a few chairs surrounding the stage with everyone else standing. We got there early enough to be one of the first rows standing. Right after the opening act, he came out and immediately noticed us and asked if we were all Filipinos. Well, he definitely guessed right. He started talking about how we were his family and went right into details about his family, the food, culture, and his own family. Like having a humorous conversation during his set. Pretty surreal. Anyways, after a killer show, everyone was filtering out when one of the producers stopped us and asked if we can be in some of the B-roll footage along with Cat Williams, since he was also there checking out the show. Of course, we agreed and sat next to him. As soon as it was over, Dave was on stage smoking a joint, and I told him it was my birthday that night. He asked what my name is. I said, Amour et moi. He then grabbed the microphone, and with everyone else still around, he said, "Today's Amour et moi's birthday, and I'm buying shots for everyone." Got to do a shot with him. One of the best random birthday moments ever. I served Daniel Radcliffe his dessert at an event and tripped and spilled some of it on him, probably due to seeing that I was serving Daniel Radcliffe, and he stood up and started apologizing profusely to me. He was very sweet and asked if I was okay. The correct British response. I like how fame never seemed to give him a big head. From what I understand, fame almost destroyed him. The stress of being Harry Potter and the uncertainty as the film series ended contributed to a fairly serious drinking problem. I was happy to learn that he's been sober since 2010. More power to him. Went with my parents to a function for some charity group, and we shared a table with Ice-T. Super nice guy, down to earth, and not high on himself. He has a mouth on him, but when he found out my dad is a retired preacher, never heard a bad word again the rest of the night. I ended up talking to music and how he goes from rap to metal. Man is cool and knows his about the metal and punk scene. I used to do sound for the band DRI. I was on the first Body Count tour with DRI, Exodus, and Propane. Trey, Ice-T, is an absolute sweetheart. I was struck on how reserved he was off the stage. I kind of expected him to be this crazy, over-the-top gangster guy, but he spent most of his time on his bus reading books. My brother recently told me that he still has a cassette board tape that I made of Body Count when they opened up for DRI at One Step Beyond in Santa Clara, California in 1991. When I was a teenager, I met Neil Armstrong at a retirement ceremony that my dad brought me to. It was at a museum and it was a private event. There was time for everyone to wander the museum, and my dad saw Mr. Armstrong looking at one of the planes that my dad helped design. Nobody else around. They struck up a conversation, and Neil asked me questions about what I was studying and how I felt about the work my dad did. My dad worked on classified planes when I was much younger. He seemed like such a gentle guy to me. A bunch of other men suddenly joined us and started asking him for autographs, which he declined. It seemed to snap him out of his happy mood, and he kind of shut down and walked away. At that time, I thought he was a bit of a jerk for not saying goodbye or anything, but I recently read about the hard time he had with fame, and I guess it makes sense. My mom and sister met The Rock when he was still a wrestler. They had a couple of car seats and tons of bags, having a hell of a time getting off the plane, and people were waiting, and this massive guy offered to carry some things for them, and they happily took the help. He grabbed some bags and held the baby carrier with my niece in it, and helped them off the plane and left. After, people kept walking up to them and asking them how they knew The Rock, and they were very confused until someone explained who he was. Everything I ever hear about him, he's super cool. He did a rap from Moana with some dude interviewing him for the guy's kids because the guy's kids were massive Moana fans. I reckon he's so nice that on the airplane, I bet you he let the person next to him have the armrest. He probably thought, this isn't The Rock's elbow room, this is the people's elbow room. Bumped into Gordon Ramsay in the lift in a hotel in Hong Kong. He was very friendly. We didn't talk to him or ask for a picture. I just blurted out, "You're Gordon Ramsay," and he acknowledged and smiled. He insisted on us going first because we had our suitcases with us. Wished us a nice day, said bye several times when we saw him in the lobby again. Very friendly. Got the chance to meet him a few years back, and he really is a pretty nice guy, just has a low tolerance for nonsense. I was working on a set once where John C. Reilly acted as one of the main characters. It was a pretty small set and low budget. Not even sure if the show ever aired. We all found ourselves working closely together for the most part. I sat across from him during lunch one day, and we chatted for a bit about random stuff. The guy talks the same way he acts, which is why I think he plays such a great character in any comedy, because he quite literally plays his own attitude in many roles. Or at least it seems. But anyway, he was a very nice and down-to-earth guy. I found it hard not to giggle every time he spoke, because I just couldn't shake the image in my head of all the roles he's played. A few years ago, Helen Mirren came to my job. I worked as a weekend hostess at a Ukrainian diner in New York City's East Village, and very famous for its pierogies. I didn't know who Helen Mirren was at the time, and it was a busy Saturday brunch. I asked for her name, put it on the wait list, and let her know it would be 20 minutes. She just stood off to the side and talked with her 2 other companions. Never bothered me, never demanded to be seated sooner, never brought up her celebrity status. Customers kept coming up and asked if that was the Helen Mirren. My boss eventually made me seat her before everyone else. Helen looked at her watch and remarked it hadn't been 20 minutes. All in all, Helen Mirren, 10 out of 10 lovely person. I met John Candy on an airplane when I was a little kid while traveling with my family. He was a big man. He had the whole row to himself in front of us with the armrest up between seats so he could be more comfortable. The stewardess were blocking anyone from coming up and bothering him, even though they themselves were not exactly leaving him alone with what talking to him constantly and laughing at his enjoyable banter the whole trip. At some point, he got up to go to the bathroom. When he came back, he looked at me, pretended to do a double take like he was surprised, and said, "Hey, you're the cutest kid ever. Don't you talk?" The way he said it was so friendly that I just smiled and giggled. Then he had a pleasant conversation with my parents, who had been dying to talk to him the entire flight, but were too polite to bother him. Not even 2 weeks later, we heard that he had passed. Met Colin Mockery at some obscure convention in my city. He actually talked to us for a few minutes, and I basically just fangirled about Whose Line and Royal Canadian Air Force. Really great guy. He has my absolute respect. I met Colin Mockery at my local liquor store in Edmonton. I lived by the theater he was doing stand-up at. Super nice guy. I was so taken aback to see him in such a casual setting. He's a total sweetheart. I went to an art summer camp with his kid way back in the day. I got to meet him when all the parents came to pick everyone up at the end of camp. I must have done a double take because he smiled and said something along the lines of, "Whoops, looks like my cover is blown." He was very nice, had a lovely chat with my folks who are huge fans of his, and never made me feel awkward. I met a few celebs working as an event photographer for fundraisers from time to time. Chevy Chase. Well, the stories are true. He was a huge jerk. Jamie Lee Curtis was one of the sweetest people I've ever met, bar none, and easily the nicest celeb I met working the camera. Very considerate and thoughtful person. She kept checking with us to see if she could do anything for us or if we needed any more shots she could help with. Great sense of humor too. Jamie Lee Curtis seems to do a good job remembering her extras. They did a bit on James Corden's show and she picked out the lady that did a scene with her several years ago. Ask Reddit. What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? Part 2. Years ago, working hotel security in Edmonton, I was escorting Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers at 0400 in the elevator down from their rooms to the lobby to get in their airport limo. I am 6'5", and so I towered over her. Dolly looked me up and down and said in her cute southern drawl, "They sure grown big up here in Canada." She was just as sweet as you could imagine. Kenny, on the other hand, and I feel bad for saying this due to his recent passing, treated me like the help, which of course I was, and even made a huffy, impatient noise when slightly flustered by Dolly's remark. I struggled to find the key to put the elevator into independent service. Dolly touched my arm, looked me in the eye, and said, "Darling, don't you pay any attention. We appreciate y'all." I guess I got good and the bad in one shot. I met Paul Rudd on a flight from New York. Sat next to him on the plane. My buddy leaned over and told me that he wanted to compliment him on this band shirt he wore when making Clueless, but he didn't want it to be weird. So his solution was to write him a note and slip it to him, LOL. So he does this, and Paul just gets this nervous look on his face, opens the note and reads it. Starts cracking up laughing, leaned over to us and said, "Best note ever." He then told us the whole story of the shirt, how he fought with the costume department about it because it was the shirt he wore to the set that day. He talked the whole flight. Dude was super cool. I work in Hollywood, so I've encountered a lot of celebrities. Nicest? Tom Hanks. Coolest? Dwayne Johnson. Funniest? Danny DeVito. Most genuine? Adam Sandler. Sweetest? Diane Keaton. Most outgoing? Adam Levine. Wildest? Steve-O. Most down to earth? John Bernthal. Most difficult? Jennifer Lopez. After college, I was living the intern life in New York, so I had to hunt around for a job that would be fine with me working just evenings. The first call I got was Kmart, so for about a month I worked at Kmart Penn Station. One night, this guy with his hat pulled down low and this really cheerful girl came into the electronics department where I work. It was a wild, wild store with tons of sketchy characters, so right away I was wary of him. Anyhow, they looked at the game selection for a minute, then the girl asked me if they could get Madden 2013. I obliged, took it from the case, and began cashing them out. It was over the $50 minimum where I had to ask for ID with a credit card purchase. So I asked the sketchy fella for his ID. He told me in this hushed little voice that he didn't have it with him. So I called up security to get the okay to finish up the transaction. As I'm talking to them, he tilts the credit card towards me. My first thought is, huh? I didn't know JP Morgan made a credit card. And then I looked at the name, Daniel Radcliffe. His girlfriend was beaming at me as the expected recognition washed over my dumb, tired face. He was super gracious and my height, which I loved even more. We're both a firm 5'5", and I was pleased to be so calm and collected about the whole thing that they both got out of there without anyone else knowing who he was. Met Jake Gyllenhaal at the stage door after his play off Broadway the last February. I was super nervous because he's my favorite actor and had heard stories of him not being nice. We said hi, and as he was signing my playbill, a lady shoved in front of me and demanded he sign her playbills for her daughters and that she just has to get a photo. He looked so uncomfortable and kept looking back at me, but he signed them anyway. I'm only 5'3" and was 17, so I just let it happen because I hate confrontation and was a little starstruck by Jake. Well, he told her off and said, "You're going to have to wait because I'm going to spend some time talking to her." Points to me because you cut her off. He then turned so he was fully looking at me and he apologized to me for her behavior. I just about died. We had a short conversation about his work. I thanked him profusely and we took a photo. I have so much respect for him for handling the situation so well, and all of my nervousness completely evaporated. Ewan McGregor accidentally ran over my boyfriend's photo a couple of years ago when he was filming his Long Way Round series. He was absolutely lovely though. My boyfriend loves bikes, so he was over the moon, bless him. Apparently they talked about his GS for a couple of minutes together. Apparently it's one of his favorite memories. He had to restrain himself a little from roasting the GS as they are notorious for their unreliability. I went on a tour of the Scottish Highlands and my tour guide was an old schoolmate of Ewan McGregor. He told a story about how on the last day of school, Ewan was talking about going to acting school and he mentioned that he thought, well, he'll be back here soon enough. Later on, he ran into him by chance while doing a tour and kind of embarrassed himself by going, "Hey Ewan, it's me from school. Do you remember?" Ewan was cool about it though. Tom Hiddleston told me my dog was awesome, so that was the highlight of my life, LOL. I am eternally jealous of this exact interaction. I saw Tom Hiddleston at LAX and I just froze like a deer in the headlights. He's arguably the most regal human I've ever seen. He's also way taller than I expected. I met the St. Bernard dog from Beethoven at Planet Hollywood when I was a kid. It seemed like a pretty nice dog in person. We had a dog that was a dead ringer for Chance from Homeward Bound, Incredible Journey. So we would be out and about and toddlers would run at him screaming, "Chance!" tackling him from behind. Never a good idea with a dog. With their mothers panicking trying to catch them, waiting for the bully dog to bite. And our calm dog would just lick them gently and be happy to see them. It was pretty funny. Met Matthew Lillard, his wife, and newborn daughter like literally after the release of the first Scooby-Doo movie. My family always hosts the 4th of July parties in our beach house, and he crashed the party. I was like 7 or 8 at the time, and my cousins were freaking out saying, "Shaggy is here." Of course, I immediately sprinted over, and he was eating a hot dog. Super cliche, I know, since it's the 4th of July, LOL. He was so cool. The whole time he was in character and offering me to have him go get a hot dog for me. I remember my little cousins asking where Scooby was at, and he replied, "Oh, Scoob's ate so many hot dogs that he's like having a food coma." Seriously, one of the most highlighted memories dating back to my youth. Met Peter Cullen, voice of Optimus Prime and Eeyore, at BitCon in 2012. They had a raffle system set up for autographs and meet and greets. He saw a bunch of us standing off to the side, including a man next to me who was sobbing because Peter meant so much to him. Peter full-on ran from the line he was supposed to be autographing and bear hugged this guy for at least a solid minute, patting his back and saying, "It's all right, Everything is okay. I'm here now." While the guy sobbed on him. Then Peter autographed all our memorabilia and was whisked away by some very angry con staff. A wonderful, wonderful man. Class act and genuinely kind. David Bowie was extremely nice. I worked on his production of Lazarus in New York City before he passed, and was no older than 20 at the time. Considerably younger than most on the crew. He took time out of talking to the director to turn to me and tell me that I was doing a phenomenal job on the production. Meant the world to me that he would do that for the shy, unsure 20-year-old. Totally made my life. My grandma sat next to Rob Van Winkle, Vanilla Ice, on a plane before he was famous for Ice Ice Baby. She knew who he was but didn't want him to know. They had a lovely 4-hour conversation, and she said he was really intelligent and nice. I met Vanilla Ice at a local bar in Pasadena, Maryland. As I was shooting pool with a buddy, he came up, introduced himself as Rob, and asked if he could get in on the next round, and put his quarters on the table. From what I remember, there was a lot of drinking and a lot of laughing. Super friendly, normal guy. So energetic too, considering early in the night he performed with his heavy metal band, 1999-ish. I met Kiefer Sutherland after one of his gigs, and he was the most humble celeb I've ever met. So genuine and nice. He took pictures with everyone and signed everything. There were about 15 people. He even had a chat with us all and thanked us for waiting for him while he was doing a radio interview. I've worked with him a few times. He's super professional and he always is in character when rolling. I haven't seen him mess up a line or lose focus. He's truly inspiring. He will also greet people at work that he doesn't know, which is more than a lot of celebrities, actors do on the job. Met Linkin Park at Ozfest in 01 in Dallas. I was 11, walking by the booth with a long-ass line. Chester and Mike seen a kid, me, told me to jump the railing, gave me a bunch of free things they signed. Told me they were glad to see a new generation coming to concerts and listening to rock. It was one hell of an experience. Too bad I was young and didn't care of the thing they gave me. Used to do delivery runs for a catering company, and we would get a lot of celebrities at the airport that ordered from us. Johnny Depp was the only one I ever saw face to face. Dude pulled a wadded up bill from his pocket and tossed it at me. I thought it was cool I got a tip directly from him at all, but once I had it all unwadded, it was a $100 bill. He's really a total sweetheart. I saw him at a few shows. He plays guitar with Alice Cooper. And after the set ended, he leaned down from the stage to give me a hug, smiling the whole time. I greeted him with the Captain Jack, and he laughed even though I was just a kid. Nicest dude. I noticed Ron Perlman while I was stocking veggies at Whole Foods. I met his eye and he asked me where the bell peppers were. I showed him, and afterward I asked, "Are you an actor, sir?" He paused and looked at me with a friendly smirk and said, "Sometimes." I smiled and nodded. I decided to roll with it and drop the subject. He seemed to appreciate it and approached me again with another produce question a couple of weeks later. He seemed like a good dude with a pleasant vibe. Snoop Dogg. Totally unflappably chill 100% of the time. It's like a superpower. John Bon Jovi. Smoked a cigarette with him. Couldn't have been more down to earth. I believe he's making barbecue sandwich for homeless people as we speak. Jeremy Piven. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Must have been method acting for the Ari Gold role. Nearly 20 years ago, I literally bumped into Mick Foley at Six Flags in New Jersey. I was walking back down the exit ramp from a ride while talking to some friends, and he was being escorted up the exit ramp with his kids to skip the line. My dumbass never saw him coming, and I backed right up into him. Dude was super cool about it though. He just caught me, gave me a pat on the back when I apologized, and said, "No problem, dude. Have a nice day." And then I realized who it was as he was walking away. My jaw dropped, and one of my buddies just looked at me and said, "Did mankind just tell you to have a nice day?" Stephen Fry was absolutely delightful. Charming, chatty, got my name wrong once at the beginning of the evening and kept apologizing for it over the course of the night. Katie Price was an absolute bollocking. She seemed to believe she ranked just under the Queen in social standing. In actuality, she just ranks under the drummer in the third best Queen cover band in Slough. Haha, fantastic. Stephen Fry is a genuine national treasure. Ringo Starr likes this restaurant by my house. I have run into him a few times while I am up there, If he's with someone else, then he's bearable. There's this one time though, I was with a friend and he exited the restaurant with his wife. My friend saw who he was and looked shocked. He just looked in our direction and said, "Yes, it is," and drove off. We were then informed by the valet guy a few feet away that we got the lucky end because some older folks were nearby. In short, Ringo is a salty man. Ask Reddit. What are the signs that someone is fake rich? Taking pictures of with money to post on social media. Don't they feel at least a bit awkward while doing this? Saw a young black man at IHOP doing this to a random patron. For some reason, he wanted to show her he had a stack of hundreds. Trying to prove you're not ghetto can make you look ghetto. Old people put their hundreds in a bank. They try too hard to sound like they're rich. I work with business owners as part of my work. The ones who are definitely very wealthy are usually very type A personalities. They're very direct. They get things done when they need to get done and don't have time to nonsense around with proving how rich they are. The ones who are nonsense will boast themselves up, but not be able to back it up. They'll try to squeeze their big money purchases into a normal conversation. "How are you?" "Terrible. I can't decide what Tesla I want to buy." They'll say things like, "I'm making so much money, I'm struggling to find things to spend it on." Then they'll try to haggle down a $10 order or ask if a $50 order can be paid in installments. My boss, owner of the company, is very wealthy. The only sign of it would be his car. He has a Maserati. It is literally the only thing I have ever seen of his that looks costly. He doesn't brag. He shows up to work in polo shirts and jeans, or on weekends in t-shirts, shorts, and tennis shoes. He doesn't dress up, he doesn't show off, and he is most definitely type A. C, works on the weekends. He said he can get more done without people distracting him. My immediate boss, on the other hand, likes to talk about how expensive things are. She shows me her daughter's bills for college room, board, and tuition. She brings new appliances into the office so she can use them. Not at all so she can use them and then blatantly tell us how fantastic they are and how much they cost. She makes decent money, but probably not as much as she would like people to think, and she definitely shows off way more than the owner, while always trying to get people to call in favors from relatives so she can get something for cheap. When they keep exclaiming about how rich they are, bragging about all their top-notch purchases they made that day or week, and flail around their money or credit cards. The majority of the time they're just broke. It's someone else's stuff, or they're using credit cards like crazy and going deep into debt that they can't recover from. Plenty of people with huge homes and nice cars live paycheck to paycheck. They just have nicer toys. This is absolutely my parents. They are up there in their years and want to stop working, but the biggest house on the block and fancy imports are not cheap. They spend more in a month than I make in almost 2 years because they have to look like they're big ballers. I work in wealth management. There is a huge difference between being rich and being wealthy. Our wealthy clients are, for the most part, very lovely people. They have manners and consideration for others. They aren't flashy, and they don't talk about what they have, but you see that they all own good quality products. They're also not crazy demanding. They don't yell at you, and they don't expect something for coming downtown. If I saw any of these clients out and about, we'd have a pleasant conversation. I wouldn't be hiding in the bathroom until they leave. The rich are people that are usually making under $100K, but want you to think that they have millions. Everything is a negotiation because they don't want to or can't pay their bills in full. They are beyond demanding. They're rude and yell at you for things you can't control, like what the Dow closed at. And then they take none of your advice and then blame you for them deviating from the plan. And if they own a BMW, oof, get ready for a storm client. Not all rich own them. Not all BMW owners are jerks, and not all jerks drive BMWs, but they're the #1 car of rich jerks. The wealthy tend to dislike BMW, and don't worry, they'll let you know that they have a BMW, and you'll pretend like you're impressed. Obviously, I have to be nice and friendly since they're clients. I'm technically a luxury service, and it sounds hip to talk about your Uber, and even more to get a car all to yourself versus the ratty rep of DC cabs. The most routinely lovely clients I have are older people in high-dollar professions, like senior partners at law firms, Lawyers, in general, are actually my favorite as a class. Maybe it's the lack of stress of finances and not needing to put on airs, but I found them all to be collected, intelligent, agreeable people. I wonder if people trying to appear higher than they make them want to put others down so they look more elevated by comparison. Name droppers that mention wealthy people they claim to know to impress others. When they talk about the rich people things they do like it's out of the ordinary and you should be impressed. I worked for an internship with a kid who was actually wealthy, like getting paid every week and just left the paychecks in a drawer in his house, and would give student loans to his friends with zero interest. He would talk about taking like month-long trips in Asia, Europe, and flying to random places on a whim, and other weird rich people activities like they were regular activities. We could never get upset with him because he was just talking about his weekend. It just so happens that his weekend was spent at a party for a company he invested a bunch of money in. He's also fun to talk to because he can sniff out fake rich people like a drug dog. I'm not a Texan, but I believe they call this big hat, no cattle. All that, but yeah, it's one of those old sayings that just keeps being more relevant over time. I grew up on a horse farm where my family trained show horses for some pretty wealthy people, and a lot of posers. It's true that wealth whispers. The truly wealthy people in our circle were not very flashy or loud about it. They owned top quality things, clothing, cars, horse equipment, and kept these things meticulously maintained. But I don't recall seeing a lot of overt branding logos. The biggest differentiator was their reason for being involved in the horse show scene. They truly loved riding and animals, and it was a big part of their family life. Multi-generational involvement. They came to the barn, rode often, loved to groom their horses, and spend time with them. The fake rich were usually in the scene for a few years at most, had a bunch of cheap yet flashy equipment, were loud, and invited their friends out to the shows to drink champagne and show them how fancy they were. They never came out to the barn, never wanted to groom the horses, or really care about them. They usually got kicked out of their barns for failure to pay training bills. LOL. When they brag about being rich, buying an expensive car, etc. For really rich people, a luxury car or an expensive house is regular stuff. You won't hear them brag about it, they'll brag about other stuff. You'll see a rich guy roll up in a brand new Rolls Royce, and he'll brag about how well he did in the golf game last weekend. I mean, I was way over par in that golf game, but seeing that horse kick that woodchuck over the fence was magnificent. Used to work in the trust department of a major regional bank. The rude guy in the Armani was in debt to his eyes. The nice old couple with old car, the old house, and clothes from Sears, staggering wealth. No ego, no attitude. I met a bunch of them. Where exactly do these elderly couples live, and what's their security situation like? Farmers that own lots of land. Blah. Mom has fake friends like that, and they love to buy Louis Vuitton and expensive stuff they don't need just to rub it in. They work in a rundown hair salon with outdated styles. My mom works at a nail salon. I really do think it's bad for her mindset. She's in a constant state of proving her wealth to her coworkers and friends. Always has been. I'm very glad she's finally realizing what she's been doing is dumb, but at the age of 55 and deep in debt, it's a hard slump for us to get out of. I have this theory that the larger the polo icon is on their shirt, the lesser the chances are they know anything about the sport of polo. You could expand that out to large logos in general. Actually, let's just expand this out even more. They spend more time talking about what they're buying, wearing, than they do talking about what they're doing. There's a great study out there called Signaling Status with Luxury Goods. The Role of Brand Prominence, 2010. You should be able to find it quite easily if you're interested. The main gist is the confirmation that with almost every luxury brand, the more expensive the product is, the smaller, more subtle the logo will be, since the flashy clothes will be bought not by people who appreciate the brand for its quality, etc., but by those who want to signal something to their peers, namely that they're elevated by being able to afford a luxury brand. Many companies have fully bought into that. Think of Armani Exchange, who have t-shirts for as little as $30, and which is, dare I say, exclusively worn by people who want the word Armani to be on their shirt. It has very little to do with the actual Armani. Actual rich people have nothing to prove. It's why you generally see that people who are filthy rich and people who are poor tend to be on the same wavelength. They don't wear flashy clothes or feel the need to tell anyone how rich they are or flaunt what they've been buying. Mind you, that doesn't apply to new money, so who knows? Like, for example, those Kardashians. Speaking of new money, some 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt eventually. They are often either not accustomed to wealth or they have been fake rich their entire lives, so cash flashing is their MO. When they say they have 6 private jets, but they only have 4. Come on, Gregory, I know you're messing with me. The rest aren't at your uncle's house. So pathetic what poor people are doing these days. Right? People like this really chafe my chinos. In fact, I was at my cousin-in-law's cotillion ball last year and found out that Uncle Benedict drives himself everywhere. If he didn't have a chauffeur, that's fine, but he didn't have to lie about it. Plus, I still owe my chauffeuse and under-butler a drink, since I took them up on a bet that he was lying. Sigh. If they carry a lot of cash on them to show you how rich they are. This can be a false positive, though. When I was growing up, one of the dads of my high school friends owned a construction business. Dude had a lot of money, like 6 figures in MSFT stock in the 80s, plus dozens of rental properties, etc. He used to always carry with him a roll of 50s and paid cash. Probably $1,000, I'd guess. I didn't grow up poor, but my parents were lower middle class and cheap as hell. $10 was a huge amount of money for me growing up. I'll never forget the first time I saw it as a teen. I was like, wow, this dude is rich. I mean, he actually was, but yeah, 30-something years later, I still remember seeing that and being blown away. There is an old stat from the book The Millionaire Next Door that said only 25% of million-dollar homes are owned by actual millionaires. Our area is full of ordinary-looking, newly built houses priced at over $400,000. We have tons of nonsense-looking, torn-down houses here worth well over $1.5 million. Source: I live in Vancouver. Wearing a genuine Rolodex watch. I just got the image of someone wearing a mini Rolodex on their wrist and flipping through a bunch of tiny index cards, and now I can't stop laughing.
What's the dumbest thing you've seen someone do at a store? My friend had someone purchase a suitcase. When she opened it as a matter of standard practice at checkout, the rookie shoplifter had filled it with clothes. They just stammered they didn't know why any of that was in there, so she pulled it all out and put it to the side, at which point the customer decided they didn't want to buy the suitcase after all. My husband used to work at a store that sold CDs and other various electronics type things. He had a mom and her kid come in one day. Mom goes off to look at things and the kid wanders over to the CDs. He stuffs about 10 CDs cases in his armpits and tucks his arm tight to his sides. When they go to leave, Hub reaches out to shake the kid's hand. He doesn't want to shake. And his mom's like, "Don't be rude, shake his hand." All the CDs fall out and Hub scoops them up. The mom took her kid outside and blistered his ears for him at the loudest possible volume. Kid was so dumb, he kind of deserved it. I watched a toddler drink nail polish. His mom didn't do anything besides take the bottle and do the weird, violent, angry whisper thing. "Look what you've done now. Mommy will have to pay for that." Her, probably. I think it was a glittery red color, the kind with massive flakes, so definitely not good for the boy. But yeah, that sounds about right. An employee asked if they should call poison control, but she didn't think or even look at them and said no, lol. I used to work at a 3-story big box retail store. Some new kid was working stocking shelves on the upper level. His hand slipped opening a box and he cut himself really badly with his box cutter. Fine, accidents happen. There are a few things one might do to remedy the situation. Perhaps use his store-issued walkie-talkie to call another employee for help. Or maybe he could use one of the many cardboard boxes he had to contain the blood while he went for help. Maybe even use one of the dozens of conveniently placed and clearly labeled first aid kits. Nope. Unfortunately, his solution to the gaping hand wound was to walk across the entire upper story to the escalator, take it down to the second story, then Inexplicably, instead of getting on the escalator to the bottom floor, which was right there at the foot of the escalator, he just got off. He crossed the entire second floor to take the elevator down. Naturally, the elevators were in the exact opposite end of his true destination, the store entrance. So he crosses an entire floor for the third time, leaving a trail of blood across the entire store. Then he just left. Never said a word to anybody. Store policy was that no spills can be left unattended until they are cleaned up, but only a small fraction of the staff was trained to handle biospills. Also, nobody ever planned on a store-wide spill of this magnitude. We had to shut down all registers except the self-checkout and have all the cashiers, backroom, managers, security, basically everybody in the store that wasn't at lunch, make a human chain space throughout the store to block off as much as they could. The store manager had to wait outside and prevent more people from entering. This was a busy weekend day too. Then the small number of people who were allowed to clean up the blood started working their way through the entire store, cleaning up an unsettling high volume of this kid's blood. Bizarrely, he came back to work the next day on a shift he wasn't even scheduled for, wearing a giant wad of gauze and tape on his hand, and tried to act like nothing had happened. He got fired, and the entire store was required to train for biohazard cleaning on their following shift. A guy stopped mid-cycle in the revolving door to pick up something he dropped on the floor and got whacked hard in the rear when another customer entered. At a previous hotel where I worked, the number of parents who let their small children play with the automatic revolving door was alarming. They would play the game of hitting the automatic button and sticking their little arms in the path to see how close they could yank their arms out before the door squashed their fingers or arms. This is shortly followed by a parental indignation that either we let their children play with dangerous machinery or indignation that we would tell the children to stop. Worked at a pet store and watched a guy try and shove a huge aquarium filter in his hoodie. Then he had the balls to approach the counter with this protruding abnormality from his belly and tried to buy something. I laughed and told him to return it or I'd call the cops. He looked shook up, waddled back to the aisle and put it on the shelf. Told him on the way out to never return. Another one from the pet store was back when Finding Nemo came out. A guy called in about getting a clownfish. So we explained the requirements of setting up a saltwater tank. The guy says, that's way too much work. Can't I just paint a goldfish? We all had a good laugh about that one. Okay, so I was at work in an ice cream shop. A lady comes in and orders a vanilla milkshake. She gets this nasty look on her face when I add the milk, but shrugs it off when I ask her about it. So I'm ringing her out and she pays, and then goes right to my owner and complains about the service. I'd like to let you know that that boy, who just served me, I'm 19, was very rude to me. What did he do, ma'am? He made my milkshake with milk in it, and I'm lactose intolerant. I demand a refund and for him to be fired. I'm just sitting here dumbfounded how anyone could be so stupid. Ice cream, by its very nature, has milk. My girlfriend works at a reptile store. There are signs plastered on every surface that clearly say, do not open any cages, ask a representative if you want to see an animal. Well, these two girls strolled in and just decided they were going to open up the tank of a Burmese python, which is a massive snake that if hungry would probably not hesitate to attempt to feast on a hand. Luckily, a couple of employees saw this and flipped out on them. To this day, I do not know what made those girls think they had any business opening and reaching into a giant snake's tank. The woman who was arguing with me, I was working in the produce department of a grocery store, about how she didn't like how one side of the watermelon was flatter, paler, and a little dirty. I said, that's just how they get when they are on the ground. What do you mean, when they're on the ground? She thought watermelons grow on trees. Okay, but imagine if they did grant trees. Like, instead of possibly getting hit with an apple that fell off the tree, you just got demolished by a damn watermelon. Lol. I'm picturing it falling and going over your head like a melon helmet. People flailing around with melon heads. I work at Albertson in Boise, Idaho, quite a few years ago. We had a man named Harley Brown come into the store with a rifle. We thought that he was going to rob us, but instead he went to customer service with it and asked if he could pawn it so he could get a beer. Yes, I realize that Reddit is supposed to be anonymous, but Harley Brown is a matter of public record as he tried to run for POTUS a couple of times in the past. The dude is a straight up kook. Store isn't quite right, but I used to work at a hotel that was dog friendly. One night, someone came to the lobby, grabbed a newspaper, and then grabbed a cookie from the ceramic jar labeled "Woof" directly above the dog bowl. He bit into it before I could stop him, and his embarrassment quickly switched to rage when he realized his mistake and that I had seen it. He, without exaggeration, screamed full volume for a minimum of 15 minutes about how awful it is on our part to have dog treats that look like cookies. They were the most generic dog treat you can imagine. I've never seen a human cookie look like one. In a jar, without a label, the jar said "Woof." I think the dumb part wasn't even the mistake of eating it, but the attempt to blame us for his own stupidity. Haha, I made dog treats a couple of years ago around Christmas. I sent a plate with my husband to his parents' house. He later told me the cookies I made weren't very good. I asked what cookies. He didn't pay attention when I said they were dog treats, and everyone at the house had the cookies. They were peanut butter and whole wheat flour, so ultimately nothing weird or meaty flavored, just really bland. This actually happened today. I'm a food and drink vendor, so I go to different stores every day to see if they need anything that we sell. There is a lot of dumb stuff that happens, but this one is still fresh. So I'm in an aisle at one of these stores, and this old man wearing a mask, which is good, calls out to me and asks me if I work at said store. This happens a lot, and it's not a big deal. I tell him no, I'm a vendor. He laughs and apologizes. I walk away and proceed 3 aisles down. Same guy comes up to me and asks me again. He laughs and apologizes profusely after I tell him that I'm the same guy he just asked. He then says that he's looking for coffee filters and can't find them. Having an idea of where it is, I walk him to the aisle where the coffee is and point to where the filters are on the shelf. Nothing really dumb going on at this point, just a little funny. He then starts to firmly pat me on both shoulders continuously while thanking me. This guy has a mask on, but just reached out and rubbed his hands all over me. Furniture store I worked at. Smaller items, anything smaller than a recliner, could be arranged to be shipped to the store for pickup, saving the customer the delivery fee. But the customer just has to bring a proper vehicle to pick it up. So, a couple comes in saying they have an order to pick up. I ask if they have the receipt. We give a physical paper one and an email one. And they say yes, but don't get anything from a pocket. After about 10 seconds of silence, I say, "Can I have it?" To which they reply, "I don't see how that's relevant. Let me talk to the manager." Manager was right there since I was fairly new, and eventually got the receipt from them. They paid their remaining balance, and I got the item for them. A twin-sized bunk bed. These people had a tiny car, Civic or something, and it was packed up like they were going on a month-long road trip. And they complained about us not telling them the box would be that big. Packaging dimensions are listed online. They had to leave it with us. They never came back for their fully paid for bed. We sent it back to the warehouse and sold it again. Edit. Forgot the best part. They left a 1-star review on the store and acted like we were the villains for not giving them, who could have been randos off the street until they gave us the receipt, their product, and for not helping them load it into their car. the review was taken down. We had a good laugh about it the next morning.
If you woke up tomorrow and were able to move things with your mind, how would you use this ability? 1. Go to a casino. 2. Flip all the roulette, blackjack, craps, tables simultaneously. 3. Profit. I've worked at a casino, you'd get tossed after 2, maybe 1, depending where you're at. Wait, 1? That's like saying you're not supposed to win there. I'd start up a moving company. Specialize in moving safes and pianos. Maximize time to profit ratio. No need to waste your time moving lamps for pennies. Me, I'm aiming bigger. Elon Musk will launch your satellite for $2 million per kilogram. I'll do it for $500,000. If you really want to maximize profits, get into anything that would normally require a helicopter crane. Or better yet, market yourself as being able to lift things a helicopter crane couldn't. Make every shot in basketball, probably easier to make money in golf. Give myself the remote without moving from the couch, just like I would pretend to do it as a kid. Does telekinesis allow you to find the remote too? We never said only the remote. Moves house into hand. Stop driving. Flying carpet for me. Keep driving in the air. No more traffic. Guys, just move yourself up with your mind. Boom, you're flying. I tried to get on America's Got Talent. I'd go on doing a singing routine, and when they start to give me the red X's, that's when I'd start levitating over the effing stage. Or use someone's drink to press the golden buzzer. Oh, I like that one. Then save the levitation for the latter rounds and still be able to surprise them. Do the old dollar on a string on the sidewalk trick, but without the string. You can do that inside your house without getting infected. There would need to be someone there. Trust me, string or no string, that joke is no fun to play on yourself. Buy anything expensive that is sold in weight. Make it lighter when I buy it, and later on make it heavier when I sell it. Sir, I think 1,300 bananas cost more than £1 and 47 cents. Later on, sir, I think 4 bananas should be cheaper than 200 pounds. Place phone camera facing the back of my head. Cast the live stream to my TV, then use my new ability to control a pair of scissors to cut the hair on the back of my head. Edit to add. Thanks for all the suggestions on using mirrors and warning about learning to cut hair first. I have been cutting my husband's and my kids' hair for years. However, my main concern for cutting my own is not just that I couldn't see the back of my head, but that my arms can't bend that well. Ideally, you want to keep the scissors closer to the skin rather than lifting up the hair too much, which will result in a distorted angle. Although at the moment we are in lockdown and no one can see the back of my head in video conferencing. So like the stitching scene in X-Men where Magneto is sticking a wound on the back of his head with a metal needle. The most unique one so far. Slightly turn a statue like the Statue of Liberty day by day by a certain degree until somebody starts to notice, and the rinse and repeat on other famous statues. This is the best one. That is until the Statue of Liberty just cracks and falls over. Just casually glue it back together using telekinesis. Tap one friend on his shoulder without having to move my hand over there, and make him think you're a ghost. I'd use it to move my legs. Oh. When you're sad, don't feel down about yourself. Break someone's leg and laugh. Day to day, it would be a third arm. I would use it to move around my mouse so that I can work faster by not having to get my hands off the keyboard. I'd use telekinesis for all my computer work while staying snugly beneath my blankie. I would use it convincing one naive person that I was getting stronger and that I must be stopped, thereby giving myself an arch enemy. I've always wanted one. I kinda hope that someone would become so fascinated by me that they'd spend every waking moment trying to replicate my power, and when they do, they'll make it either prime objective to put me in the background because they want to be the only one left with such power. I'd probably do everything remotely from my bed for like a week straight, and a week after I would go so bored I'd decide to get up, but I would struggle to use my body at all. Then you move your body with your mind. Get rich and act like I don't know nobody. But you gotta blow up first. Do you have other goals or... I would probably use my telekinesis to pluck the hair on the back that I cannot comfortably reach with tweezers. After that, I would eat chips without getting my fingers covered in stuff. Oh, and I would probably also use it to close the blinds if there was a glare on the television. Use chopsticks for the chips, not back hair. I would use it to make my movement a little harder so my muscles will get used to it and I get stronger. It is good practice for new power too. In the same vein, you could probably use the telekinesis to make little tears in your muscle fibers so you can build muscle without doing anything at all. Use it to move people 1.5 meters, 6 feet, or 1 alligator away from me, whatever your preferred method of measurement is. Mess with my coworkers. Move objects a few inches to the left or right of where they left them. Things like that. Press buttons on their keyboard. Hold down the shift key when they're typing. Tap caps lock, etc. I would go back to sleep. That's a good answer. You just don't give a thing. I wouldn't. I don't want the foundation after me. It's okay to use it as long as you don't get caught. Hold book, phone, switch, screen above my head with my hands resting comfortably next to me while laying on my back and fetch things around the house like food so I don't have to get up after getting comfy. And then it still falls on your face when you get distracted. That's just how the universe works. Massage my shoulders and back. Came here to say this. If push that thing to the limit, can I lift heavy things? Can I push over an abandoned building and lift up its pile of rubble? Can I feel things with my mind or do I perceive them with other senses? Could I use the ability to remote view things? Then I try interesting things. Can I make a shield by preventing atoms from moving through it? Can I create a volume of air for myself and be in space or underwater? Can I move myself? How fast? I'm an engineer. It's time to build a spaceship. How about honing your skills to literally bend space-time and no longer be bound by mortal bonds? Probably just make life easier. Forgot to close the fridge? Shut it with your mind. Forgot to close the door? Fixed. And other useless things. Who forgets to close the fridge? I think I never forgot to do that, no offense. We do. Well, kind of. Our fridge is quite old and sometimes when you close it, it kind of just hangs ajar. Many times one of us has been drifting off to sleep and then, is the fridge door closed properly? How much focus do I need to put into this power? Because I'd love to make myself food by doing this while still playing video games. But if I had to completely focus on the task, it may not work. I feel like it should require some fair amount of focus. I don't know, but I'm getting pretty lazy, I'll tell you that. Probably fly. I've always wanted to fly. Establish how small a unit of matter I can move. With practice, moving protons, neutrons, and electrons around to create valuable elements. Platinum. From invaluable ones, carbon. Make complex molecules the world has never seen before. Like solid-state graphene matrix for batteries, buckyballs that contain drugs that can be time-released and cross the blood-brain barrier. Make kids fall off bikes? Man, I could watch that all day. Wouldn't that be dangerous if you start fusing and fissioning molecular bonds at the electron-neutron level? I'd use it on myself and fly. You could fly and bring all your friends too, depending on how strong the powers are. Picture of the black dude eating a slice of pizza with his mind. Experiment. Gotta figure out limits. Size, weight, duration, speed, fine control, multiple objects. Further planning comes after that. Easiest thing to do would be to go to Vegas and play roulette. Spend the day practicing, playing a little and watching, manipulating a lot. Then start playing for real. Over the course of a week, slowly build up a decent sum, intentionally losing a little here and there. Don't want to gather attention. On the final day, talk up the employee running the table. Say, I've got a system I figured out over the last week. Bet it all on red, then black, then red, then look at watch and intentionally stay away from the table for a few minutes. System says I gotta cool off now, can't tempt fate or some such. Looking crazy is okay here. Repeat a few times. Basically, turn a few hundred in to some tens of thousands over the course of about 10 days. Repeat as necessary. Take a pocket notebook on the last day that has my system written down in code. Actually gibberish. Use it as I'm cooking. It'll be much easier now. You wouldn't have to work on your chopping technique because you wouldn't have to worry about cutting yourself. If you could hold the food perfectly still without touching it and move the knife at the speed of thought, you could really dice an onion. And just think about complex cake decorations, executed flawlessly each time. can be a very low-profile profit if you don't want to mess with casinos. Get a glass of water from bed. Once hydrated, I would watch TV all day. Next time I go grocery shopping, I wouldn't have to touch the cart or food. That is very social distancing of you. I would take coronavirus and push it somewhere else. Push it into the sun and do the same with all other pathogens while you're at it too. Cue to countless people being dragged by their lungs to outer space. 1. Taps on the shoulder to mess with people. 2. Moving one leg of a 4-legged table 1 centimeter higher to piss people off. 3. Blow wind down people's necks and into their ears to mess with them. 4. Shut the mouths of annoying people. 5. Fix that slightly misaligned sidewalk piece on my walk routine. 6. Turn security cameras slightly just to mess with whoever looks over the footage. 7. Make trash attack litterers. 8. Pick up trash at local park germ-free. 9. Take out trash at home the lazy way. 10. Turn on people's ringers on their iPhones in class. 11. Make Trump's hair dance while he's live. 12. Make some plants wave at people to mess with them. 13. Lock my door when I'm too lazy to get up and lock it. 14. Lock teachers I dislike out of the classroom. 15. Switch the letters on movie theater text to say poo-poo and other infantile words. 16. Go to Party City and make masks chase people. 17. Make the masks also move their lips to freak them out further. 18. Evade the police and countless other organizations that are probably on my case on this point. 18. Go too fast and get caught. 19. Let myself out whatever facility I am contained in. 20. Live life as a fugitive, never able to live truly at peace because I couldn't resist the urge to mess with people.
If Gordon Ramsay had to use your kitchen, what would he be most angry about? He opens up a cabinet door and 6,000 mismatched Tupperware containers and lids fall out all over the floor. And then a cat runs into that cabinet and has to be coaxed out. Not again! I don't own a mixer of any kind, and the whisk just broke. I do everything by hand. One Thanksgiving, our hand mixer broke, and instead of just using the KitchenAid mixer sitting right there on the counter like a normal person, my husband somehow attached the whisk to his electric drill and went to town. I was equal parts baffled and impressed. That's what we do because we can't afford a stand mixer and we don't have a whisk. Those knives are so blunt, Snoop Dogg is trying to smoke them. Yep, knives will definitely be the first thing that will make him yell. He is definitely yelling about how dirty my stove is right now. That's filthy! The only spices I have are cayenne pepper, salt, and pepper. When I got my first apartment after college, my parents came down to make Thanksgiving. My dad was cooking and asked where I kept the spices. Pointed to the cabinet and he said, "It's just sprinkles and an unopened can of Mrs. Dash." The salad that is being microwaved. No, please tell me that this is a joke. It's a joke. Ramsay was completely pissed off with one place and asked if there was anything they sold which wasn't microwaved, and one woman timidly mentioned the salad. The off button on my oven is broken. I'm sure he'd be cool about it because I'm a scrawny teenager who doesn't know anything about cooking. We found a loophole around it, cook duration, which basically shuts the oven off after an inputted amount of time. You've got to remember, Gordon Ramsay is only mean to overconfident people who think that they are the best. Ramsay knocks them down a peg and puts them where they belong. He doesn't pick on kids or nervous people. What's crazy is the shift in demeanour between his solo instructional videos and his restaurant horrors, or whatever it's called. When he's alone in his kitchen, he has a super zen but enthusiastic sweetness in his personality. Why are all the pans just thrown into a cupboard? When did these knives get sharpened? Why is there a sheet pan in the microwave? I have roommates with zero ideas of how to keep a kitchen organised. Whoever designed my kitchen, obvs never used a kitchen. I have tried all the configurations of where to put things and can't find anything convenient, to put in the stupid Lazy Susan corner cabinet that doesn't make you want to throw things every time you have to put something away or get something out. My mum puts spices in the cabinet upside down because she thinks it keeps them fresher. I could see him yelling at her for that. Mine are alphabetized because I'm insane. I don't think he'd have a problem with that though. Oh, so I can get you to the next level now. First, group them by colour, all the green herbs together, all the orange, yellow and brown spices, red spices, white spices, all alphabetized of course. Makes it super easy to find what you're looking for. The lack of sharp knives. Same here, not a single sharp knife to be found. I'm so confused by how people that cook regularly leave their knives blunt. Is it laziness or something else? When they're sharpened, they make your life so much easier. Where are the fresh ingredients? Why are your dishes so dirty? And why the hell is there so much booze? Are you me? The dish would be what he would call me out on. I usually do my dishes when I can't fit any more in my sink, but I also sometimes just stack them next to the sink when I can't fit more in. The washing machine staring at his face. Ha! OMG, I laughed so hard imagining these tears are running down my face. Thank you. He's from the UK. It's normal to have a washing machine in the kitchen here. All the expired food in the fridge. It's rotten, you donkey. My husband literally puts on a Gordon Ramsay voice and shouts this when we clean out the fridge every 6 months or so. We gross, lol. Never a better time to avoid the grocery store and eat what you have. The fact that I wouldn't let him in. The electric stove. I hate it. The house we bought was perfect except for that. I'm eventually going to run a gas line into the kitchen. I don't mind the flat top electric ones, but the ones with the coils drive me crazy. Gas is definitely the best though. See, I don't understand the hate for electricity. I've had electricity for years in most apartments I've lived in, and I actually prefer it. Gas heats up too damn fast and ruins my non-stick pans, and I'm always afraid I'm going to mess something up and burn my apartment down. My parents have the glass top electric, and I hate that too, because it takes half a decade to boil a pot of water. Lol, the lighting. The lighting in my kitchen sucks. Mine too. My light casts a shadow directly onto the stove and the hood light is burned out. My kitchen is awful. 20-year-old, dirty, dilapidated cupboards, broken drawers, worn-out surfaces that haven't been replaced since as long as I can remember, old AF freezers, an unstable breakfast bar, a faulty second-hand oven that randomly switches off when it wants to, an out-of-date fridge that has been there since they bought the house, and the bottom fridge is broken, and last but not least, a dirty, damp, water-damaged floor that hasn't been replaced in over a decade and currently no plans to do so. It's so bad, I don't even want to walk barefoot on it anymore. Gordon's got a lot to be angry about. If this is a rental, it's time to have a long talk with the landlord. There's so much junk food, I almost mistook your kitchen for a rubbish tip. Everything. This is the correct answer. Me and the fact that there aren't 2 pieces of bread on either side of my head. The fact that I have a microwave and use it frequently. I saw this on a YouTube comment of a Gordon Ramsay video and I'm paraphrasing, but there is a time and a place for microwaves. They are amazing in homes because they give you hot food in a very quick and efficient manner. Not a lot of people have time to purchase, prepare and cook a full meal. However, the restaurants that he goes to should not be using a microwave. You go to a restaurant to have someone do the purchasing, preparing and the cooking, not to have someone nuke your lasagna. He would be angry because I only have 2 knives for all. For meat, for bread, for butter, for cleaning of vegetables. For all. Where the hell is the bench space? How can you cook without a bench? Where's the kitchen? Seriously, this is it? You can't pull the knives completely out of the knife block without leaning it over because of the cabinet above it. I think he would pity me more than anything. All I have is a titanium cup, spork, and a small camping stove with a fuel canister to boil water. But if you were to insult me, you put the less in homeless. The counters are a few inches lower than normal. You don't notice it until your back hurts because you've been leaning over them to do stuff. When he saw the amount of food in my freezer, he would be even angrier with my mum's freezer. She freezes the bread too. There won't be any regular potatoes. I loathe peeling potatoes with a passion, so I only have frozen potatoes, hash browns, or instant mashed potatoes. I know he won't take kindly to me using convenience potatoes only and refusing to buy them whole. He'll have to get over it though. There are good 7 sim tiles, the only way I can think to measure worth of counter space, and all but one of them, on a good day, is covered in people's semi-permanent clutter and unavailable to do any actual cooking on. I suspect he would also have a minor coronary over the occasional use of the stovetop as an 8th counter, because I know I do when I see that happening. The fact that he has to use my kitchen. That he is now the sous chef. That roach that lives in the far left corner of the kitchen. The oven. We have a fan oven, and it has a mind of its own. If something says put it in at 180 for 15 minutes, then we usually have to put it in at 170 for 10 minutes. We basically have to do practice runs of any new foods we haven't had before, just to make sure we don't overcook it. It's annoying. But over the years, we've sort of mastered the guessing game. What is your favourite moment from internet history? A radio station here in Dallas had recently, mid-1990s, started streaming online. The announcer was describing how amazing it was to get emails from listeners from literally all over the world. Her favourite was 2 boys who liked the station's music, but what really fascinated them were the traffic reports. They'd spent their entire lives on some little island in the Pacific, and the thought of a line of cars several miles long absolutely blew their minds. I remember in the late 90s, early noughties, one of the radio stations in Phoenix got tricked into thinking all the members of Hanson, Mbop, had died in a car crash. This was late at night, and they were getting their information via fax, which obviously was a hoax. But at the time, my sister and I believed it. Not sure how true it was, but at one point, the DJ said a bunch of people were holding a candlelit vigil at one of the street corners near the radio station. Nowadays, if something like that happened, I'd just Google it. Kind of crazy to think about it. The launch of Gmail. 1 gigabyte of space? Totally. Remember when you had to be invited to use it? Yeah, invites were so valuable. You had 5 invites to give away. I had to choose who my best friends were very carefully. LimeWire. It was also responsible for giving the family computer AIDS, but boy did it download. The best was using LimeWire free to download LimeWire Pro. My computer was so slow that I'd start downloading a song before I went to bed, and it would still be downloading it when I woke up. I remember the night Princess Diana died. The news broke on the internet a few hours before it hit the news. It was crazy. Not necessarily my favourite moment, but stands out as the first real time I saw the potential of the internet to distribute information much faster than the news. Dude, yeah. I was an ICQ, and some said it in the channel. I told my parents, and they were like, "How do you know?" It popped up on the news a while later. Internet for the win, and it kept on winning. I also remember that day because the second ever episode of Star Trek Voyager was preempted by the Nothing New Happening live coverage of her death. They were just filling time and showing the same scene constantly. And because they didn't just rerun that episode, I actually missed it and didn't see it on the air again for several years. Honestly, I wish that there was some kind of law that would prevent TV shows from varying from the scheduled content unless war were declared. Early on YouTube, like 2007-ish, videos on it were more authentic and captured real life back then. Now it's literally a market. And the fact that you could have video responses to videos. Me and my friends used to make videos in 2007, and every single one would have a video response of just a black screen and a disguised voice saying he was coming to kill us. Freaked us out. Turns out it was one of our friends who was making videos with us the whole time. Our stupid selves really thought a stranger was stalking our 15-view videos. My favourite moment is when one guild in World of Warcraft held a gigantic memorial service for one of their people who stroked out and died. It was huge. There were dozens of people there, all just paying their respects. And then another guild came and crashed it. Don't get me wrong, it was a terrible thing they did. But it's hard not to crack up when the action starts to the tune of Scatman. And to be fair, holding any kind of event on a PvP server without posting guards or scouts is a big no-no, and begging for disaster. I'm actually fairly certain that if this was the memorial I'm thinking of, a lot of people also said afterwards that the person who died probably would have loved it, simply because they were really heavily into the PvP, player versus player aspect of World of Warcraft. Yep, that's the one, I think. All I really remembered was that person who died was female. There was a time when the internet felt like the Wild West. Corporations were largely ignoring it, and people were making all sorts of content out of passion, not because they wanted to make money. It felt like all digital products and information in the entire world was available for free through either torrent or the Usenet. Along with the great availability came great risk. If you weren't smart, a song downloaded could end up being a virus that wiped your hard drive. You could easily hack websites, and often even databases and systems. The government was pretty ignorant about all of it, so if you were even moderately careful and not attacking important government sites or financial institutions, it was very low risk. I never did any black hat stuff, but I loved finding exploits and poking around systems as an unauthorized user. Blogging wasn't evolved yet, so everyone made really awful websites full of great content. The internet as a whole was about concepts and ideas, not people and products. Of course, as more people started getting online, the companies started paying attention, and then came MySpace. After MySpace was created, normal everyday people started flocking to the internet. With this massive influx of users came new laws and new advertising. The new content was now commercial when it wasn't egotistical. So, I suppose for me, that moment of internet history I love the most is right before MySpace became popular. It was probably best about 2 years before MySpace, when we were taking on DRM, the RIAA, the MPAA, and corporations in general, and feeling like we were winning. Anonymous was active and seemed untouchable. People all across the globe were helping NASA search for extraterrestrial life in a giant hive project called SETI. Everything felt new and free. As an aside, supernova.org and their related forum and IRC was badass. I made a bunch of friends there that I kept in contact with for years. A lesser known one, but I still love it. Samsung had a new phone out, and you got a $50 Play Store credit for buying said phone. Samsung hired out the promotion to a no-name company. Go to their site, enter the IMEI, like a serial number, name, email, and they email you a code for a $50 Play Store credit. Well, IMEIs are sequential. Plus, you can easily grab one from an eBay auction. This was a planned 4-month promotion with 30,000 $50 credits to be given out. Yes, $1,500,000 in Google Play Store credits. And they were all gone within 2 days. People were grabbing a couple of hundred each and eBaying them at half off. I saw one guy's eBay account. He made like $3,000 via selling them. Slick deals. Those guys will ruin any promotion possible. I can't remember all the details, but there was also an eBay Christmas promotion where you would get $1 every hour by finding one special auction. To this date, I still don't know how they did it, but there were only a few people who ran a script or something like that which found the auction. They must have made tens of thousands because the promotion ran days before eBay noticed that something was wrong. Weirdly enough, I can't find proof of this whole story anymore. It's like it never happened. 4chan sending Taylor Swift to the school for the deaf. Followed closely by Pitbull to Alaska. And, of course, the ultimate dog tease always holds a place in my heart. For me, it was when they sent Justin Bieber to North Korea. Also, does anybody remember Mountain Dew's infamous gushing granny incident? Wasn't the top winner at one point Hitler did nothing wrong? 1994. Got AOL in high school and was pretty depressed. An unknown 15FTX literally saved my life by talking to me all night long and wouldn't let me sign off and take some pills. She even PM'd me every day for the next 2 years to make sure I had someone to look forward to talk to and listen. Best damn friend and internet moment I could have asked for. Maybe not historical, but the most important internet moment in my history. To answer a couple of questions, no, we never met in person, but she knows why. We kept in touch for a long time and really just grew apart. No hard feelings, it just happened. It doesn't change what she did or what it meant. No, it's not a fake. There are some things that we just can't say in person. I had a great upbringing and have a wonderful family. I didn't want to disappoint them with my thoughts of myself as a teen. I was lucky that a complete stranger listened on the right day, and I had access to the tool that made it possible, even with my 28.8 modem. YouTube before Google bought it. Remember when people didn't make money, or at least not very much, off of their YouTube videos? They just did it because it was fun. I remember that for a long time, YouTube was basically a bunch of sketch comedy, music videos, and illegal movies being posted in 8 different parts. Old Flash animations. I remember watching them on newsgrounds at friends' houses and in my dorm. All Your Base Are Belong to Us, Magical Trevor, Catface, The Llama Song, The Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny. There were so many, and they were just for us, you know? Songs, stories, and videos just for us internet people. I could say badger, badger, badger to a friend, and they would go mushroom, mushroom, and people who were not internet people would look at us like we had just grown second heads. But a fellow internet person would go, ah, snake, a snake, ooh, it's a snake, and we'd make a new friend maybe. The news that Flash is no longer being supported as of the end of this year, I didn't expect to feel as sad about that as I do, but that's a piece of my youth I actually will miss. Did any of you all have favourite Flash animations from sites like Albino Black Sheep or Newsgrounds? Twitch plays Pokemon when it first started. It was such a revolutionary thing, and everyone was watching to see how it would go. Anticipation for other applications of the concept ran high. Unfortunately, it was just a short fad and nothing more. It also sparked such an intricate lore in that short time. Praise Helix. My favourite part of the lore was when Red gets to the end, all of the voices in his head stopped and he was finally able to be at peace. And then he returned in Gen 2 using the exact same team. So unreal. One of the first message boards I was on was the Wolf Web. It was for NC State students, staff, faculty. In 2004 we had a huge snowstorm and the news stations were showing the local closings and delays. Members of the Wolf Web found out that Spectrum News wasn't screening their closing submissions, so a bunch of users decided to exploit it. They submitted fake closings and a bunch of them made it on air. Some of my favourites were Colonel Angus Chicken, open 6 to 9, Mike Hunt Enterprises, 3rd Shaft Report Saturday morning, Watkins Family Reunion Service, Holler APN NIS, Cecil's Cockring Emporium, back up by tomorrow. 4chan, locating the "He will not divide us" flag by looking at flight patterns and star constellations. Man, those guys are insane. I remember reading something a while back about how they solved some ridiculous mathematical problem by the author phrasing it as an anime post. The day the impossible was done in EverQuest. The Sleeper was killed, and on a PvP server no less. Having been there, was at a friend's house as he was a part of it since I played on a blue server at the time, it was an amazing and one-of-a-kind event that changed gaming history. Early MMOs were a one-of-a-kind experience that can't be recreated. World of Warcraft Classic is good, but not the same, ever again. The whole all these characters are real people? This is awesome! Was a unique experience. MMOs came at the perfect time when the internet was good enough for multiplayer gaming, but still a relatively niche thing that only nerds used. AOL Instant Messenger being the hub of internet communication. But once MySpace came in, it was crazy how fast things changed forever. When Hotmail was a 2 megabyte inbox service. That was actually not cool. Jump to Gmail after that. When Kanye West had one of his first public meltdowns on Twitter, it seemed like everyone I know, who stays up past 11 PM anyway, was live tweeting or posting about it, just watching the epic train wreck in progress. I remember just before his album The Life of Pablo came out, and he has like 25 tweets all labelled in order. That's the one I remember. Also, when he mentioned he might make an album called TurboGrafx 16, and then the value of the console with the same name went up for a week or so by a bunch. John Titor. I know it's been pretty much wholly debunked at this point, and the guy behind it turned out to be some lawyer in Florida, but there was one thing about it that always interested me. When John Titor was contemporary, another thing going on at the time was the mystery and speculation surrounding this secret invitation with the codename Ginger. According to the people behind Ginger, it was going to be as huge a step as the internet. I'd argue that the development and perfection of touchscreen technology has had an equal impact on the internet, but I'm rambling. Someone asked Titor what Ginger was, and he correctly described Ginger as an electric 2-wheeled scooter, and Ginger was eventually revealed to be the Segway. He went on to say that it didn't amount to much and was pretty much all hype. I mean, I know the whole thing was a work, but who could have seen the Segway coming? Even if he was just very adept at identifying trends and reading into hints, he also accurately predicted the general, whatever attitude the Segway was greeted with. Sometimes I'll go back through the original Titor posts and see if there's anything else like that. Of course, we should now be 5 years removed from Titor's civil war, so that was a flop.
What are some really amazing animal facts? The Greenland shark reaches sexual maturity at 150 years old and lives 300 to 500 years. Always fascinates me there's something that can live that long. I think that is one that goes blind pretty quickly due to parasites, but just says stuff it. I barely use eyes anyway. Being blind for 500 years, what a nightmare. In clownfish, each school, tribe, whatever, has one female and a head male, and the others, all males. If the female dies, the head male turns into a female, and the next in line to the leadership throne would be the male leader and bang the former male leader. Yeah, clownfish are wacky. So in Finding Nemo, Marlin would have turned into a female and Nemo would have had a mom but no dad, and Nemo would have banged his dad mom. Ravens can mimic sounds and speech as parrots can. They found that ravens can actually learn words and form coherent statements. They can usually learn about 200 words, the same as a toddler. A horse's teeth take up more space in their skull than their brain. Foxes use the Earth's magnetic fields. Like a guided missile, the fox harnesses the Earth's magnetic field to hunt. Other animals like birds, sharks, and turtles have this magnetic sense, but the fox is the first one we've discovered that uses it to catch its prey. According to new scientists, the fox can see the Earth's magnetic field as a ring of shadow on its eyes that darkens as it heads towards the magnetic north. When the shadow and the sound the prey is making line up, it's time to pounce. So do they only attack north or something? Sort of. I did more research and found this from a study. They found that foxes strongly prefer to jump in a northeasterly direction around 20 degrees off from magnetic north. This fixed heading was important for their success as hunters. They were more likely to make a kill if they jumped along their preferred axis, particularly if their prey was hidden by high cover or snow. If they pounced on the northeast, they killed on 73% of their attacks. If they jumped in the opposite direction, the success rate stayed at 60%. In all other directions, only 18% of their pounces were successful. Unlike humans, dolphins most actively decide when to breathe. Captive dolphins have been known to hold their breath until they die of suffocation, which some have suggested amounts to dolphin suicide. So it's a manual breathing then? Yes, I think it's called active breathing. A man can hold his breath until he passes out, but his nervous system will reflexively kick in and force him to breathe again. Dolphins are not wired this way. This is also why they never truly sleep, as they need to consciously maintain their respiration. When a specific species of carpenter ant realizes it's going to lose the fight it's having with another insect, it latches onto them and blows itself up. Membranes along the ant's body can be activated that'll lead to combustion. Special enlarged glands in its head mean the explosion sends a glue-like substance shooting out that will very likely entrap the previous presumptive brawl victor. Sperm whales in the Caribbean have an accent. Is this real? Yep. Sperm whales in the Caribbean and Pacific Ocean speak different dialects. The babies start out babbling, then pick up the family language from those around them. It's one of the arguments for whales having culture. Hippos are some of the most aggressive animals on the planet. If a crocodile is a wise hunter that chooses its battles wisely, a hippo is that one dude that's always looking for a fight because he spends way too much time at the gym and hasn't found a reasonable use for all his muscles. They're territorial as hell, capable of charging you at almost 40 kilometers per hour on land, and frequently pick fights with whale boats. They have mouths built to kill. 2, those giant teeth are only for combat and can grow up to 1/2 meter long. That's right, hippo teeth can get as big as an average human's forearm. With teeth that big, you might be asking yourself, wait, just how big are hippos? Which is a question you should never have asked, because the answer is bigger than you're comfortable knowing. Hippos are more than 1.5 meters tall at the shoulder, meaning if you want to stare down a hippo, it would look you dead in the eye before opening its mouth more than a meter and biting you in 1/2 feet. Made even more terrifying when you learn that hippos are primarily herbivores and kill just for the hell of it. They can weigh more than 4,500 kilograms and grow to more than 5 meters long. They kill more than 500 people a year in Africa. And in 2014, one attacked a boat filled with Nigerian school children, killing 14 and biting the boat in half. For bonus points, let's do some physics. As we all know, Newton defined force as mass times acceleration, or F equals ma. A hippo can move at 40 kilometers an hour, which some conversions tell us is 11.1 ms. Multiplying that by the theoretical weight of an adult male hippo will tell us that a charging hippo can hit you with 49,950 newtons of force, which, for the sake of simplicity, will round up to 50,000 newtons, or 50 kN. If you're looking at things in orders of magnitude, that's 5*104 N. Now, I'm not a physicist, but a quick Wikipedia search tells me that 45 kN is about the force produced by a small car during peak acceleration. 50 kN is half the force exerted by a seatbelt and airbag on a passenger if they crash headlong into a wall at 100 kilometers an hour. The maximum force ever exerted by a human during a clean and jerk lift is 80 kN. Hippos don't mess around. Penguins. 1910 to 1913, Scott Antarctic expedition on the sexual life of penguins was deemed too shocking for the public. During that time, he witnessed males having sex with other males and also with dead females, including several that had died with the previous year. He also saw them sexually coerce females and chicks and occasionally kill them. There was an early Antarctic explorer who witnessed Adelie penguins doing much this, and he was so shocked he wrote notes in Greek and kept them hidden. Owls bob their heads up and down to help improve their depth of perception. You can try it out yourself. Focus on an object and bob your head. It doesn't work for us, but you do look like an idiot. Is it also true that owls' eyeballs are oval and that's why they have to be able to rotate their heads 360 degrees because they physically can't move their eyeballs? Yes, and they also have long legs. Killer whales have accents and regional dialects. Surprisingly, a lot of animals have dialects. It is even proved that accents of cows can differ from meadow to meadow. A cow can move different than another cow only living 100 meters away. Caterpillars have over 200 muscles in just their head. My favorite fact about some caterpillars is that they still exhibit behaviors after they transform into a butterfly. When they form a cocoon, they release enzymes and literally digest themselves into a soup of cells, despite basically turning themselves into a smoothie. When they re-emerge as a butterfly, they will still exhibit the same behaviors they had as a caterpillar. A giraffe's neck has only 7 bones, same as a human's. All mammals have the same number of cervical bones other than the manatee, 2-toed sloth and 3-toed sloth. There's an intelligent species of jumping spider called as the Portia spider. These little munchkins are specialized spider hunters with different tactics for a particular problem. Their favorite food is the common weaving spiders. Their tactical range from imitating fallen debris on the prey's web to directly attack their prey. Their venoms are potent against spiders as it will only take seconds to paralyze their prey. I hate spiders and I'm not going to Google that one, but it gives me a weird comfort to know there's a spider hitman out there. They don't look creepy. In fact, they're really small and kind of cute. Well, at least for me. They're your usual curious jumping spider, except they look a bit different, but still the same jumping spider species. In a fox couple, if the vixen dies, the male fox will become single for the rest of his life. Now, if the male fox dies, the vixen goes off to find another partner. Various species of tarantulas around the world will keep frogs as pets. The tarantula protects the frog larger predators, while the frog protects the spider from smaller pests such as ants. I wonder why a cute children's show hasn't been made about a tarantula and a frog. Woodpeckers' tongues are super long and wrap around their skull inside their head to provide cushioning for their brain when they peck. Edit. They definitely have long tongues that wrap around their skulls. Thanks for linking the diagram. But the role that plays in cushioning is probably not significant. There's been a lot of information provided on that and how they are able to deal with the impacts on a comment below. I had to look up this diagram to understand it. Really helped me wrap my head around it. The blobfish looks like a normal fish underwater, but since order a deep sea fish, the depressurization makes it look like what we see in pictures. I really want to see a blobfish underwater now. I too always have. I've heard they look like normal fish underwater thing before, but never seen the proof.
What should someone never say in your country? I am German and asked a person that recently came here what he liked about our country. I did not expect the answer to be Hitler, but he was Austrian. Austria's 2 greatest tricks were convincing the world that Beethoven was Austrian and Hitler wasn't. I live in Japan, and the one thing I can say that consistently angers everyone is, the Kuril Islands are Russian territory. I am Russian, and the one thing I can say that consistently angers everyone is, the Kuril Islands are Japanese territory. I'm a Kuril Islander, and the one thing I can say that consistently angers everyone is, the Kuril Islands are not Kuril Islands territory. Sieg Heil. It's illegal, though you really have to mean it for actual prosecution to happen. My guess is Germany, so by really have to mean it, if you're singing a Nazi war chant would get you prosecuted. Again, depends on the intention and other contexts. Singing something like that with gusto would probably get you in trouble. I don't see an acceptable context, other than playing a character, obviously. Reciting the text in a teaching capacity, for example, could be a totally different thing, though. Leaving the stereotype aside, but if someone says, "I hate carnival, samba, football," people will look at you in a strange way. I think around 2015, when I was in some kind of university class, one of the icebreakers was whether or not you like the Seahawks. I'm a Seattleite, and I happened to mention that I don't like the Seahawks, and everyone stared at me. Some were a bit angry. I had to include, "I don't like football," and they were all satisfied and proceeded back to their usual class business. At least it's just because of lack of passion for the sport. No harm, no foul. I'm a fellow Seattleite and football lover, and can attest to how egregious it sounded before I finished reading the post in its entirety. Also, it's 2020, and that may seem slightly pathetic to you now, so it's understood. Enjoy your other passions. Never say anything about Brexit unless you are close to 100% sure the present company is on your side. I imagine it's the same in the US with Trump. Nah, we just speak our minds and get into political arguments. I'm not a cricket fanatic. Australian traveling through California signed in at a motel in Fresno. The bored Indian teenager behind the desk got so excited when he heard my accent because he could finally talk about the cricket. I had the same thing in a hired car in New York City. As soon as the driver heard my Aussie accent, it was straight to the cricket talk. I guess it would be strange being a cricket fan in the US. So you guys are Chinese, no? How do people from Hong Kong feel about the majority of the world viewing them as Chinese? It depends on what you mean by Chinese. Ethically Han Chinese, people are okay with it, but Hong Kong culture is more accurate because 157 years of UK rule have created a unique hybrid culture. Specify that they're Chinese in general, except a correction that specifies that they are Hong Konger. That's because the general term Chinese is now irrevocably linked to the People's Republic of China, the government of mainland China. I'm from India. What's it like living in a third world country? My computer has stopped working. I'm sure you'll be able to fix it, won't you? Hey, I can do a really good Indian accent impression, or anything about religion other than Hindu. Somewhat unrelated, but I did a great Indian accent impression against a scam call telling me about criminal activity on my SSN. The caller sounded Indian. I said my name was Narendra Modi, and they didn't catch on until I asked how I could bribe them to help me flee to Mexico. The Falklands are Argentine. I went to Argentina a few months ago and noticed that they included the Falklands on all their maps as if they own it. Islas Malvinas? As an Argentinian, I can confirm all maps do this. From a personal perspective, it's dumb. We still don't have proper closure with what happened, and it definitely doesn't help that a lot of the people that fought are still alive and that politicians use that as a tool. Hola or gracias. If you're from Spain and come to Portugal and speak Spanish, we don't mind it. We just get annoyed when foreigners think we are Spanish or that we speak Spanish. Do you guys hate us? Buenas noches desde España. We don't hate you. The Welsh are basically just English. It's a principality, not a country, etc. Your language is pointless and it's a waste of money to keep it alive. Everyone just speaks English anyway. That first one will definitely get a reaction. I'm Welsh and part English. The Rugby World Cup is always interesting to say the least. Oh, for sure, haha. I was in a flat at university with 8 people, including myself, and we were split right down the middle. 4 Welsh and 4 English. The 6 nations were absolutely brutal. We all got along really well until the lead up to the matches during which we spat on each other's ancestors, naturally. Your anthem sucks. Hey now, EA is not a country. If it were, the citizens would have to pay for the food boxes, healthcare boxes, education boxes. Pass the non-maple syrup. It's called syrup de puta in Quebec, implying that it was tapped from a telephone pole and not a maple tree. How you doing yet? Beep! Okay, so you're clearly not Australian. Big old American here. Do not drop the C word in the States. No, I don't think the beaver is a majestic animal. It's not our official animal because it's majestic. it's because we were only settled deeper than the coast because Europe loved them as hats, and their ass gland is really useful. They're rodents who look funny. We killed millions of them, so we owed them official animal status. Just like bald eagles, eh? I'm not a huge fan of the bald eagle being our national bird, but it was picked for the great seal centuries before we started killing them off with DDT in the mid-1900s. I think Franklin had it right when he wrote, "For my own part, I wish the bald eagle had not been chosen the representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character. He does not get his living honestly. Besides, he is a rank coward. The little kingbird, not bigger than a sparrow, attacks him boldly and drives him out of the district." The founders picked it because they drew comparisons to the Roman Republic, which used an eagle. Personally, I would support the American robin, Turdus migratorius, as a better choice since it's incredibly common and lives year-round in most of the U.S. It's widely recognized by Americans and seen as a sign of spring and the beginning of a new year of growth. The blue jay would be another option, but mostly because of how big of an asshole it is. That you don't like tacos? Norway. Yes, Norway has a weird obsession with tacos and has its own shelves on the store with it. I know people that don't like tacos, but yeah, a bunch of us have a weird obsession with tacos. And frozen pizza. Yep, I know people who don't like it, but everyone is shocked when others don't, and it is just a weird cultural thing that a lot of people don't know before coming here. This poutine tastes awful. As a Canadian, I've definitely said it before. Good poutine is incredible, but there are some bad ones out there. String fries don't belong with poutine. Top of the morning to ya. Literally nobody ever says that here, but the Americans love it for some reason. Yes, same with shrimp on the Barbie. Literally no one says that. They're not even called shrimps here, they're called prawns. Yet every American tourist that comes over insists upon saying it. As an American, I don't understand why we think it's a thing. How often are you going to be barbecuing shrimp anyway? I'm Russian. Americans won the World War II. Alternatively, but less offensive to most Russians, we've only won World War II because the Americans helped us. Soviet soldiers raped many German women and it was a war crime. War crime could be done by victors too, and it was ultimately wrong. Stalin was an incompetent leader with a criminal background. The intervention against Bolsheviks during the Civil War, 1918 to 1922, by Western militaries was not an attempt to conquer Russia, but to stop the Bolshevik Revolution, and plenty of Russians joined the Brits, Poles, French, Americans, Czechs, and others in fighting against the Bolsheviks. Estonia did not join the USSR in 1940 based on a referendum and wish of the people to live in a peaceful, progressive communist country. This was an occupation, no different from the German occupation of Czechoslovakia. Eastern Europeans don't dislike the USSR because they are Nazis and are ungrateful for us defeating Nazi Germany and liberating the Auschwitz. They just don't like what we did with the whole Iron Curtain thing after 1945. Russia is 2.5% of the global economy. They only listen to us because we have a ton of ICBMs, a powerful imperial and Soviet legacy. If we started at this level, the US would have treated us like Iran or Venezuela, as would our Chinese allies. No, the rest of the world isn't united with us to overthrow Western imperialism, and they wouldn't join our side if we decided to invade NATO countries. They aren't waiting for us to start the struggles. They aren't secretly plotting to liberate themselves from American oppression. No, not even China would support us. We've been alone in that. Hitler had some good visions, but a bad spirit. Yeah, that is totally acceptable in most countries. I'll kill your children just after I'm done with your wife. Yeah, I can see how people might not like that. Why are you putting milk in your tea? That's disgusting. It depends on what kind of tea you're drinking. Here in Hong Kong, we drink traditional Chinese tea without milk, but we have something called Hong Kong-style milk tea. It's literally one of the best beverages ever. I'm from Israel, so anything you'll say, someone will probably get mad for it. Why? Political issues. The fact that about every one of the different groups, different religious, right-wing, left-wing, and so on, will say something different, and some of them will be extremists. The fact is, we have too many a-holes here. You see where I'm going? But I guess most of these are problems that are present in most countries. Any insult towards Spanish food will put you in jail. We really love the Mediterranean diet. I'm from Brazil. It wasn't really a dictatorship, referring to the dictatorship in the period of 1964 to 1985. Yes, it was a dictatorship, and people got tortured and killed. I live in Ireland. If you're visiting as an American, especially, don't bother telling us about your Irish heritage or how Irish you are and how great it feels to reconnect with your roots. Nobody cares, and every American before you has said it too. You're not Irish because your great-great-great-granddad lived in Kerry and then moved to America when he was 3. You're a plastic patty. Fair enough if one of your parents is from Ireland or you lived here at one point, but otherwise, you're just kind of making a show of yourself. So, I live across the country from the fam and went back to visit for Christmas one year. Hadn't seen that side of my family for quite some time. At one point, my aunt, who was very into researching the genealogy of our family, tells a story about how they went to Ireland to see some of the areas that our family came from as far back as they could find. Mind you, this was a couple hundred years ago at least. Anywho, she eventually got to a point where she said she walked up to somebody's house to ask them something about it, if they had any old deed information, old paperwork, etc. I forgot how it happened, but I guess she ended up staying there a day or two. The way she told it, I kinda got the impression she was imposing, but the residents didn't want to be rude. I died a little inside listening to the story, and it just reminded me, yikes. We saved you in World War II. Only really comes from Americans when in England. It's extremely disrespectful to the hundreds of thousands that lost their lives defending our home. Many families to this day are still affected by the war, be it family members not alive while their widows and children still are. Men who lost their friends in foreign fields, and bombs that didn't explode being found, causing a reminder of what the country endured to remain sovereign. So if you say this, you will quickly find that no one wants to talk to you. I don't understand your accent. Still, game isn't funny and it sucks. Iron brew tastes like cough medicine and it's disgusting. Are you Catholic or Protestant? I voted Tory. Alternatively, Boris Johnson, you have to hand it to him. Well, since they changed how they make it, apparently you can still find proper iron brew in the Netherlands and a few other places in mainland Europe.
Which deceased person, if brought back to life, would be the most surprised to learn they became famous posthumously? Niels Henrik Abel, mathematician completely unknown in his lifetime, died at age 26 of tuberculosis. Then his mathematical work was discovered, which put him near the top rank of mathematicians ever. When Norway raised a statue of him, they put it on a tall column because nobody knows what he looked like. Similarly, Évariste Galois died at age 21. Nah, Galois knew his work was gonna revolutionize mathematics. He also knew that he had terrible eyesight and was a poor shot, so dedicated the last night of his life before the duel summarizing the proofs and ideas in his head. Truly an unfathomable sacrifice. 99% of people would probably spend their last hours with their loved ones. The poet John Keats, who died at 25, convinced he'd been robbed of a chance to make a significant contribution to English literature. His gravestone literally reads, "Here lies one whose name was written in water." Most of what I know of Keats comes from the Hyperion Cantos book series, but it sounds like Keats got dealt a pretty messy hand in life. Alfred Wegener, who invented tectonic plate theory. No one believed him until long after he was dead. There were so many elementary school students that recognized how NW Africa would fit nicely between N and S America. Ignaz Semmelweis faced ruin because of his insistence on aseptic technique, hand washing. He would probably wake up and have a heart attack if he found out how important his methods are today. Elizabeth Short, posthumously known as the Black Dahlia. Even people who do not know much about true crime always still seem to know her name. This question got me thinking about all the people that would be surprised at how much notoriety they got from disappearing or being murdered. Vincent van Gogh, Definitely. He just wanted to sell and make his art his whole life. He died without having that. I'm pretty sure he died dirt poor. His grandson made him famous. It was his dream to be famous for his art, and he'll never know because he died before it happened. It was his brother's wife and son who made him famous, actually. But yeah, it's incredibly tragic that so many artists who are practically worshipped now died without knowing people appreciated their work. Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, was considered an unsuccessful writer while he was alive. He only managed to sell about 3,000 copies of Moby Dick in his time. Now it's one of the most well-known classics. Emily Dickinson, Edgar Allan Poe, Sylvia Plath, Franz Kafka. There'd be a lot of shock writers on this list. I mean, you take any composer, writer, or painter from centuries ago and they will be surprised. During their life, they could have been next to royalty, but to imagine that you are celebrated even after hundreds of years, it's not something easy to wrap your head around, I imagine. So it would be cool to say anyone very respected, like Beethoven, Cervantes, or Goya. To know that everyone considers you the best of the best, even after the rotting time, might blow your mind. I feel like of all people, Beethoven would be the least surprised. However, anyone before him would be severely surprised because it was a tradition to lose all fame once you died, since nobody would play your music. Beethoven's death started the movement of people playing and conducting dead people's music, and he was worshipped like the next Jesus sometimes. That Roman in Pompeii who died while masturbating. That's the way I want to go out. Alan Turing. This is a great answer. His achievements were supposed to be top secret. Otzi the Iceman. It's the earliest surviving naturally mummified human remains, at about 5,000 years old. It would take a while to explain the concept of fame to him first. I remember reading about this in a standardized reading test in 4th grade. It was so interesting that I read it a bunch of times and almost ran out of time to finish the section Lamau. Joseph Merrick, otherwise known as the Elephant Man. I think he would be surprised about how many plays, books, and even had a movie made about him. Edit. Wow. Thank you guys for silver, and yes, I know that Joseph Merrick was famous in time, but I think that he'd be surprised that he's even more famous, but also that today's time he would be more accepted. I think people of this generation would be more supportive of him in general. Poor guy, was treated harshly throughout his lifetime. I think Shakespeare would be floored if he knew his works were still being taught and read. Seriously? You guys read my plays that are meant to be watched? What, you egg? Rasputin would be proud and confused, especially if he heard the song and fanfictions written about him. Fanfictions? You know what? I won't even ask. Anne Frank. They published my diary? And it's been read by millions of people? So Anne actually was in the process during her arrest of preparing her diary for publication. As they heard in a broadcast, some diaries might be published after the war. I know someone who read the true original for research, and apparently it's much longer and filled with more mundane stuff most people wouldn't be interested in reading. Henrietta Lacks. Edward Teach, also known as Blackbeard. Dude was a pirate for a few years. He had some reputation, but he wasn't exactly out there for decades doing pirate stuff, and well, he was just another outlaw. Don't think he'd see pirates being romanticized like this coming, or him being the face of old-timey pirates in general. Blackbeards are here! Hey, he'd be surprised by his long-lasting legacy. But dude, he was infamous in his time. A General History of the Pirates, written just after his death, was a bestseller. Besides, you don't get called El Gran Diablo by the Spanish authorities and blockade Charleston Harbor for 6 days and somehow not end up famous. Franz Kafka. He had no faith in his work, and his will stated the executor of it to destroy them all. Another guy went against these wishes and published. Wow, you really earned that username. That was so hard. I was going to say something until I saw it. Got me. He was likely just some middle-rank accountant or something like that, and now his name is remembered when those of kings and priests and warlords and whatnot from his time are all forgotten. Just like Erastus, the director of public works from Romans 16:23, he was mentioned in a list of people sending their greetings, but became famous when someone found his name carved in a public work. To go the opposite way, I've always thought the ancient Roman emperors like Julius Caesar would be embarrassed at how small their once great empire now is. At its height under Trajan's rule, the empire spanned a greater distance than the modern United States, and now the empire is completely dissolved and their descendants are relegated back to the peninsula. If I were a Roman emperor, I would be proud to know that the Roman state, monarchy, republic, empire, Byzantium lasted for more than 2000 years. I would be fine with Italy just being a regular nation, knowing that Latin languages are spoken everywhere and that Roman culture is dominant over the entire Western Hemisphere. Vincent van Gogh. The dude was severely depressed his whole life and only sold one painting while alive. He eventually killed himself only for his art to be worth millions now. I lived in Amsterdam for a few years and always wondered what Van Gogh would make of the mobs of tourists at the museum dedicated solely to his work, especially because more visit that museum than the Rijksmuseum next door with countless Rembrandts and Vermeers and other Dutch master works. Nostradamus. He wouldn't have seen it coming, that's for sure. He'd probably be happy that his scam worked. Emmett Till. He's not famous enough for the price he paid, sadly. This should be higher on the list though. The way he was treated as a human is what made him well known. Emmett Till probably just wanted to live an undiscriminated, fulfilling life like most people I know, no matter what color they are. Unfortunately, it was the way he died that made him famous, so he probably wouldn't have any guess fame was coming as it was happening. I think some of these people may have been able to guess they'd be famous after the art they created and left behind. Most of the people listed here got some chance at life and creating something. Most of them probably wanted some level of fame. Emmett Till became the face of a movement against lynching and racism because how he died. We must not forget. May he rest in power. Jon Snow. No, Dr. Jon Snow. Look it up. He was the chief pioneer of the germ theory of medicine and considered the founder of epidemiology as well as the person who proved that cholera spreads through water, particularly because of the Broad Street Pump incident. His findings and reports were heavily scrutinized all his life, and he was dismissed as a nut and conspiracy theorist. Insert, you know nothing, Jon Snow joke here. But those very same reports and investigations are the main reason modern cities have sewers under them. See also Ignaz Semmelweis, proponent of the "doctors wash your damn hands and mothers won't die in childbirth" theory. He was so shunned that he ended up in a mental hospital and died after being beaten by orderlies. Rosalind Franklin. Not even Watson and Crick truly recognized the importance of her work in her lifetime. Now the first thing you're taught in genetics class is that it was her picture that helped them figure it out. I think she'd be surprised to learn she's famous now, because she was completely overshadowed and unrecognized in her life, not because I believe she didn't know what she was doing was important. She has a very interesting story. It's believed that they actually took or saw her image, known as Photo 51, without her knowledge. Had it not been for that specific image, there's a good chance that double helix structure wouldn't have been discovered as early as it was. Here's the real kicker about her though. Watson and Crick received Nobel Peace Prizes as a result of their discovery, but she wasn't awarded one, seeing as she died a few years prior. Which deceased person, if brought back to life, would be the most surprised to learn they became famous posthumously? Part 2. Stieg Larsson, who wrote The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series. He was a dedicated, talented writer who, in life, never found great success. He became a best-selling author many times after his death. Had no idea he's dead. In his life, he was a political journalist. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was published a year after he died. Just prior to his death, he had finally found a publisher who accepted his trilogy. He probably was psyched just to have his work published at all. Can't imagine he would have predicted it would turn into a major bestseller with multiple movie adaptations. Archduke Ferdinand. He was heir to one of the most powerful empires in the world. I don't think he'd be surprised to learn he was famous. Yeah, he was famous in his time, but I bet most people wouldn't have heard of him today if he wasn't assassinated. Anastasia, the most famous Romanov, and she was a young teenage girl who actually did nothing of note in her life, while her sisters, parents, and brother were more famous in their time. Is she really the most famous Romanov though? Maybe I can't see it clearly for being a history nerd, but surely Nicholas II, Peter the Great, and Catherine the Great are all more famous? Van Gogh, I guess. He is an everyday name these days. He would be proud and shocked to see his influence. I think he'd be happier to see how his treatment changed the art world forever. The Basquiat movie summed it up pretty well. They ignored Van Gogh's genius, and now they never want to risk letting history repeat itself. Robert Johnson and his impact on music. Imagine going from selling a few hundred, or whatever, some say a few thousand or Terraplane Blues, but that's largely unsubstantiated, records to being the person behind an award-winning million seller 50 years after your death. Not to mention Clapton's cover album of some of his songs selling 500,000 on its own. That'd be surreal. The sad thing is, he may not have had to wait long for some recognition. Whether it would have lasted or not, or if not dying under mysterious circumstances would have impacted the legend to the point that there wouldn't been one, he was invited to play at Carnegie Hall, which would have really been something significant. Ignaz Semmelweis. He pioneered the idea that hand washing saves life and was the source of the name of the Semmelweis reflex, which is the tendency to reject new evidence or knowledge that contradicts established norms, because this idea was soundly rejected until after he died. How is this not higher? The dude literally invented hand washing for hygiene in medicine and was locked up in an asylum over it. Worth the research to see how far medicine has really come in such a short period of time, and also a good name to throw around for those coronavirus people who compare it to pre-1860 disease impacts. Nietzsche. I heard he was selling less than 100 copies of some of his books, and now he's known as one of the greatest philosophers ever. The man was ahead of his time. No. Nietzsche fully believed he would be recognized as great eventually. He considered himself to be ahead of his time, and people didn't recognize his greatness because he was too far ahead of his time. If anything, he'd be surprised he's not more famous. Some men are born posthumously. Arthur Conan Doyle would be severely pissed off. He'd be livid that no one knew he wrote other stories than Sherlock. I have an anthology of his vampire short stories. They're pretty good. Straight up Diogenes. The mad lad literally lived his life trying not to be important and ended up being one of the most popular people in history. But he became pretty famous. He was even visited by Alexander the Great. Allegedly, he asked Diogenes if there was anything he wanted from Alexander. He replied, "I'd have you stand out of my sun." The guy lived in a clay wine pot. Matthew Shepard. He was just a college kid that was tortured and beaten to death for being gay. I don't think he knew he'd be remembered for anything. This is the first person I thought of. If only he could see what the outrage at his death helped bring about. I doubt it would make up for any of the torture and pain, but it would hopefully at least make him smile at what the future holds for others who live in fear of being themselves. There's a photo being passed around of a fully nude black man as a prank which started at the beginning of the pandemic. Basically, people are sending a link to friends which looks like a local alert regarding quarantined areas nearby, and when you click it, you are faced with this huge hog. The image is pretty famous now, and a podcast I listened to tracked down the man's identity, and he passed away a long time ago. I'm pretty sure he'd be surprised at his posthumous fame. The photo prank has been going around for years, even before the pandemic. I've fallen victim multiple times. H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft would be one of those famous people who finally get a Twitter due to pressure from their fans and then immediately makes everyone hate them. Emily Dickinson. I'm surprised no one mentioned her yet. I can picture her eye twitching in consternation at the notion. William Shakespeare would be the type to try to play it cool, but you would hear him celebrating the second he thinks nobody's looking. Nah, more like willpower from something rotten. Edgar Allan Poe. He was fairly popular at the time. The Raven made him a household name and he was a respected literary critic. His financial difficulties were well divorced from his level of celebrity. That is, by the end of his life, at least. Ian Nasir. Bet he'd wish he just destroyed all that hate mail instead of letting it pile up in his house until it's rediscovered almost 4,000 years later. Fun fact? There is slash fanfic based on those letters. Otzi the Iceman. As most everything in this world of ours would be wholly alien to him, including the modern concept of fame, he would be the most shocked. Egyptian mummies would be both horrified and comforted as their tombs have been plundered, but they are remembered and their bodies preserved, which is part of the religion. The mummies would probably be disturbed about that whole eating mummies fad though. My dad, because he's not dead yet. And he's not famous, but he's dying of cancer in a hospital right now, and no one can be with him because of the pandemic. Edit. He's gone now. I got to video chat with him before he left. He was scared of death, but mostly we spent time together the way he lived. We talked about my siblings, his children, me as a baby, the little things. God bless you, Dad. I'm glad you went peacefully. Jim Croce. If you don't know him, he wrote and performed the song Jim Hopper sang along to Season 3 of Stranger Things after telling Mike off, "Don't mess around with Jim." Jim died in a plane crash in 1973. He recorded 5 studio albums, but he was still a struggling musician who was taking part-time jobs to make ends meet. After he was killed, his albums went to number 1. Yes, this! Most of his fame was posthumous. I find Time in a Bottle to be particularly haunting. That Chinese doctor that tried to spread word of the COVID-19 virus and who later succumbed to it after being harassed by police. Li Wenlang. Agreed. It's a shame he doesn't know what a brave thing he did. Eva Cassidy. She sadly passed away from cancer at 33 in 1993 and wasn't widely recognized until after her tragic death. Amazing voice, her version of Fields of Gold will always be one of my favorite songs. Amazing voice. From everything I've read about Eva, she was terribly shy and not at all interested in being famous, so I think she would be floored to see how popular her music became after her death. William Henry Harrison. He'd be surprised to learn how much we mock his presidency. He didn't screw up anything. Lovecraft would probably be surprised, followed by a heart attack from seeing how much the world has changed. Dude was not really a fan of change. To be fair, he wasn't a fan of a lot of things. Emily Dickinson. There are better answers on here, but she's the first one that came to mind. Only ever published about 0.7% of her body of work, like 12 poems, during her lifetime. The other 1,800 poems were discovered and published by her family posthumously. 12 upon 1800 is 0.006, which would round to 0.007, but that is actually 0.7%, not 0.007%. Otherwise, yeah, good candidate. Bob Ross. He had no idea when he died how huge of an impact his legacy was going to make. Everyone knows who Bob Ross is, non-artists and artists of all types. He is a cultural icon and his paintings would be worth millions if Bob Ross Incorporation actually sold his work. But they don't believe Bob would have liked that. He was just sit in it for the joy of painting. Such a cool dude. I'm so glad that they're not selling them and being true to his character. Van Gogh, maybe. That's what I was thinking. He only sold one painting. We're lucky his brother helped him. I would love to see Anne Frank come back to life and her reaction to what happened. Well, at least nowadays she could get a therapist. Joan of Arc, Vlad the Impaler, Peg and Whistle, everyone from the Salem witch trials. H.P. Lovecraft. He died poor and alone. I think he'd be surprised to see his influence in almost all modern horror stories and films, Adventure Time even. Sacagawea. Imagine finding out they put your face on a coin for helping some white boys not die in nature. My favorite one in the whole thread. Cliff Burton. Metallica was big when he died, but I doubt he had any clue just how massive they'd become. He'd definitely say something about those guys being such tools now, and probably wonder why they never kicked Lars out of the band.